Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul. In this video, we're breaking down the Deadpool trilogy.
X gon' give it to ya, he gon' give it to ya. X gon' give it to ya, he gon' give it to ya.
These films broke the mold when it came to comic book movies, and the Merc with a Mouth's now one of Marvel's biggest names. Throughout this video, we're going to be going through the Easter eggs and everything behind how these three were made. So come with me as we head out on this road trip where we'll be putting in maximum effort. If you enjoyed, please hit the thumbs up and make sure you subscribe for breakdowns like this every week. That out of the way, thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into Deadpool.
Whose balls did I have to fondle to get my very own movie?
Now, Ryan Reynolds put in maximum effort in order to get it released, with it originally looking like it would never see the light of day. You see, the film had actually been in development since 2004, with David S. Goyer penning the script. Coming off the back of Blade Trinity, the pair had worked together to make, well, what was basically Deadpool Light, but in a way, this helped to pave the way. This is why they thrown this line later, as it was supposed to be a nod to the roots of him getting the role.
To have fun at your midnight showing of Blade 2.
Artisan had signed a deal with Marvel just 4 years earlier, and they seemingly owned the rights to the character. Reynolds was down to do it, and thus the pair started putting it together, but they ran into a snag. Turned out that Fox owned the rights to the X-Men, and technically that encompassed Deadpool as well. So Artisan never got to do it, but it piqued Fox's interest, and thus they started putting their own Deadpool plans together. This included X-Men Origins Wolverine, which originally was going to have Reynolds as a cameo. However, the further they worked on the script, the more they realised he could work as the end villain. However, we all know how that turned out, though they did make sure to keep the character alive in the post-credit scene. Yay! Now, even though it leaked heavily and got terrible reviews, the film still made bank in the opening weekend. Thus, the Deadpool movie was put into production with a script being worked out in 2010. Robert Rodriguez said he was down to direct, but he stepped down and was replaced by Tim Miller. Miller had worked on the VFX for the X-Men films and even shot the opening scene for Thor: The Dark World. His friendship with James Cameron really helped to get the movie made, and he was pushed here to make his first full feature-length film. However, after Green Lantern came out, Fox shit the bed a bit and started working behind the scenes to try and change the film's structure. They wanted to go the PG-13 route and needed some test footage before greenlighting the flick. They ended up getting Miller to produce a CGI render, which Ryan Reynolds then provided the voice of. Fox said "Fox this" and then canned the whole idea, with them instead wanting him to feature in a team-up movie. This was around about 2012, which is when the Avengers had just changed cinema. You get a team-up, you get a team-up, everyone gets a team-up movie, and thus they scrapped the project and worked together putting Deadpool in a team-up film. That is, of course, until 2014, when someone ended up leaking that test footage. Now, no one knows who this devil is, as so far the perpetrators have never came forward. Reynolds himself said he wished that he'd thought of that, as in the end, it's what helped get the movie made. We'll never know who did it, but Reynolds was clearly thankful of the handsome devil behind it. After getting showered with love from the fans, Fox begrudgingly decided to put it in production, and now that people had seen the test footage, it also meant that it was gonna be R-rated. Thus Reynolds got to make the movie he wanted, even though it did have a much smaller budget. That came in at just $58 million, after initially being $65. Fox apparently cut $7 million from the budget at the last minute, which forced their hand on a lot of different things. They ended up having to alter the script because of this, and they removed a motorbike chase between Deadpool and Francis. This cut down the film's action scenes to just the two, so they then reworked the script to tell things in a non-linear way. The final fight was also scaled down, which is why Wade forgets his bags of guns and ammo.
God damn it! I'm gonna do this the old-fashioned way, with 2 swords and maximum effort.
You can actually catch this bag in the car later on, with him leaving it in the front seat as he gets out. Either way, I think the scale back stuff works in the film, and they even poke fun at Fox for being cheap.
It's a big house. It's funny that I only ever see 2 of you. It's almost like the studio couldn't afford another X-Man.
This is because they wanted a Hugh Jackman cameo, but Fox said he's gonna cost too much. Now that was a bit of a dig.
He's made you look a right knob.
This was apparently Fox chairman James Giannopoulos' favourite line, which at least the guy knew how to take a joke. Now the film was shot with a working title wham, with George Michael getting several references in the trilogy. At 30 minutes we see Wade saying his most prized possession's his Wham album, and Careless Whispers played throughout the film. Cut at the announcement of Deadpool 3, and we also had Wake Me Up Before You Go Go played as the music in the very first trailer. Now if you're studying up the DVD, Blu-ray or 4K, then you're gonna be hit with Chef Poole ripping up a chimichanga that he then microwaves. This then explodes and takes us into some action scenes in the film. Just before the final battle, Deadpool says,
Time to make the chimmy fucking chongas.
which have become his favourite food in the franchise. However, Reynolds picked this purely because of the way it sounds, as in the comics, Deadpool prefers pancakes. And the movie opens with Angel of the Morning by Juice Newton, which was apparently the first thing they put into the script. That's according to IMDb Trivia, and it also talked about the names in the credits. These were apparently originally used as placeholders, but Tim Miller found it so funny that he just left it in. We see it's Some Douchebag's film, produced by Asshats and starring God's Perfect Idiot. This is beside Ryan Reynolds' Sexiest Man Alive cover, which he got given by People magazine in 2010. We've then got a hot chick in Marina Baccaran, a British villain in Ed Skrein, a moody teenager for Negasonic, Stanley's gratuitous cameo, and then Colossus as the CGI character. We also have the real heroes being Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick, who put in maximum effort for the film to be written. It instantly lets you know the tone of the movie, and this intro is filled with lots of cool Easter eggs. Firstly, we pull out to see the guy Deadpool later burns with a cigarette lighter, and originally he was going to make a joke about him being Bullseye. That was in a nod to Daredevil, but we'll talk about the complicated rights issues in a bit. From here we go to a coffee cup with the name Rob L on it, which is a nod to Deadpool creator Rob Liefeld. There's also a card coming out of a wallet, which is a nod to Ryan Reynolds' role as the Green Lantern. As we go from the wallet, we can see there's also a card that's come out for number 5 Orange. This is a strip club from Reynolds' hometown in Vancouver, which is where they go at the 1 hour 11 mark, which I know from the sign outside if my wife is watching, as I do not know anything about strip clubs, and if I was googling the address of number 5 Orange, it's purely because it was for research purposes for a YouTube video. There's also a Hello Kitty lip balm, and Deadpool did a tie-in with Hello Kitty to sell Hello Kitty backpacks. The Hello Kitty backpack's what he loads up with the guns at the end, and this is what he leaves behind in the taxi. Now we then see Wade teabagging, poking someone in the eye, and lastly wedging someone before cutting to a bigger freeway shot. Here we can see an X on the skyscraper before we then cut to a drawing, which we later see him sketching on the bridge. However, there it says, "Hi, I'm Francis," whereas here it says, "Hi, I'm Deadpool," to introduce the character. This sequence is built off the back of the short film Carousel, which was created by Adam Berg in 2009. Berg was apparently a frontrunner to direct this film, and though he didn't get it, they kept this sequence in. Now from here we cut to a cabin meet Dopinder, which Reynolds said was named after a kid that he went to school with. He said that he sadly got struck by lightning, and that the character was named as a tribute to him. He told this at a Google talk, and it was met with some nervous laughter, to which Reynolds said, "I'm sure that was more information than you ever wanted to know. Really random story, but it acts as a tribute to him, with Dopinder's taxi appearing throughout the film. The sign on the top says, 'Need a hero,' and we also learn that his cousin's stuffed in the boot. Not a boot itself. You see, kids, in England, we sometimes call the trunk the boot, but that's more information than you ever wanted to know, but Reynolds provided the muffled cries that we hear coming out from it. Deadpool also introduces himself as
Dopinder.
Pool. Dead.
which is likely riffing off how James Bond always reverses his name order when he's introducing himself. In the taxi, Deadpool constantly mentions Christmas,
Merry Christmas.
and this is a carryover from an earlier version of the movie.
Why the fancy red suit, Mr. Poole?
Oh, that's because it's Christmas Day, Dopinder. And I'm after someone on my naughty list.
Ajax, or rather Francis, he was going to be getting released from the raft on Christmas Day.
Let's just say, it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas.
Later on in the montage, when he hunts him down, we had a deleted scene where he was like a kid counting down the days to Christmas. The raft was too shown to us in a deleted scene, but they had an issue getting the rights to it. The raft, of course, also appeared in Civil War, which Marvel released in 2016. Thus, they didn't want to risk the lawsuit, the Disney snipers, which happened with a number of other things. That included Bob, who we meet around the hour 30 mark.
Bob? Wait.
Bob here is a nod to Bob, Agent of Hydra, who's a side character that appears throughout Deadpool comics. However, they had to remove the Hydra element in case it caused a potential lawsuit with the studio. This was also seen in Deadpool's mask as well, with there being a joke about how it was an inside-out Spider-Man one. Lastly, though the finale seems to feature a helicarrier, they spent time making sure it was altered enough to not cause issues. They also wanted a cameo with Nicholas Hoult, which was going to build off the back of this line.
Tell Beast to stop shitting on my lawn, and you!
We were then going to cut to Holt dropping a steaming pile of shit in his garden, but unfortunately Holt didn't have the schedule to allow it. After meeting Ajax at the airport, we watch as he heads out in his convoy, which Deadpool later intercepts on the freeway. Ed Skrein said he based this on Roy Batty from Blade Runner, with him also adding in a touch of real-life serial killer Harold Shipman. Jumping over to that, this scene is obviously a recreation of the test footage they put together. They redid it from the ground up though, and altered a couple of things, again due to all the rights. Originally Deadpool was playing Holla Batgirl by Gwen Stefani, but this was then changed to Salt and Pepper Shoop. Fox requested that the song got used, but apparently there was a hold up with the rights team. Pep called Salt and they were apparently pissed because Deadpool's their favourite superhero. Eventually it cleared though with their kids' minds being blown when they saw Ryan rapping it on the bridge. Here he says,
"Whose balls did I have to fondle to get my very own movie? I can't tell you, but it does rhyme with Pulverine."
This is our first nod to Hubert Jackman, and behind the scenes he apparently used his name in the franchise to help this get greenlit. The pair are of course great mates, and yeah, can't wait to see them in their third film together. As we cut to the bridge, we can see a sign that says O'Rourke Road and Birdie Parkway, with the first being a reference to Thomas O'Rourke, who worked on the visual effects. As Ajax drives on the motorbike right after this, pay attention because you can see him pass a sign that says Liefeld Street and Kelly Way, with the first obviously being his creator and the second being a nod to writer Joe Kelly, who worked on the book in '97. We then see Ajax passing under signs on a bridge. Ditko can be seen here in a nod to the legendary artist Steve Ditko, who is of course one of the forefathers of Marvel. Next to that we can also see McGuinness and Wernick, with McGuinness being an artist whereas Wernick is a screenwriter. He helped produce this film, and we then get this line,
"Rich Corinthian leather,"
which is a nod to this.
Request nothing beyond the thickly cushioned luxury of seats available even in soft Corinthian leather.
Now as Deadpool's head is smashed like the like button, we also get a sample of the 1966 Batman show. As he kicks the guy out, we can also see Silver Avon Grayson Circle, which I'm not too sure on, though the latter might be a nod to Dick Grayson. I don't know why it would be that, but it's nice having to pause the film every 2 seconds to read this stuff, and thank God I didn't make my parents proud by getting an actual job. Anyway, we then cut to the opening credits played out at normal speed with Deadpool taking down the bad guys. As one of the guys is beheaded, we can see a sign that says Shaham Road, which is a nod to Tamar Shaham, who worked on the visual effects. There's Swagger Drive and Tristan Ave, but I can't find anyone for them, and I'm not that smart, so if you know, then drop it below. Cut to the final street sign shot, and we can see Parker, which is a nod to Peter Parker, and lastly Nicocesa, the latter of which is Fabian Nicocesa, who wrote the first Deadpool solo series in 1993. Whew! That also just happens to be the year Shoop was released, and as I've been saying, it's all connected. Now if you want to support the channel, we're selling It's All Connected t-shirts right below the video. We also got our Theory Time stuff, House of Dragon and more, and huge thank you to everyone who picks one up. Jumping across to the X-Mansion, we get a returning location from the franchise that we often get to hang out at when it's not getting blown up every other film. This of course appeared in the original X-Men films and was later used in the DC show Arrow. We see the sign for the address outside of it, which I believe was repurposed from the original X-Men film. Inside we can catch Colossus eating cereal, and this is a location that showed up in X2. This is where Wolverine and Iceman hung out, which then led into the attack by William Stryker. This attack then led into Colossus upstairs, which was his first live-action appearance in his metal form. Here we also meet Negasonic Teenage Warhead, who is named after a song by Monster Magnet. She was originally going to be the character Cannonball, but they switched it off because they liked her name better.
What the shit? That's the coolest name ever!
Now for the film, they ended up changing her abilities, with her originally being a telepath. However, the writers thought that didn't fit with the name, so instead switched things up and gave her the explosive powers. At about 37 minutes, Deadpool asks if she's a sidekick, but instead they say she's a trainee.
So what? You're like, his sidekick?
No, trainee.
This was apparently because Stanley hated sidekicks, so Marvel movies had a mandate to steer clear of using that. On the bridge, we then see him shooting people as he counts down the bullets. Lying down, they used a similar pose of him on a bearskin rug for lots of the movie's promotion. This in itself is a nod to Burt Reynolds, who did a nude photo shoot on top of one. Killing the henchman, he then switches to slicing people up with his katanas in order to take down a mutant that survives the headshot. This is Ryan Reynolds' stunt double from Blade Trinity, which is a nice way to pay him back for being in that movie. Now, these swords are put into his back to be in an X formation, and the name both being Arthur. This is a nod to Golden Girls star B. Arthur, who Deadpool was a big fan of in the comics. In the next scene, we catch him dealing with a pizza guy and also sees wearing a t-shirt with her face on the front. According to Reynolds, the rights to that cost $10,000, but in the end, it was donated to charity. After getting shot in the butthole, we then get what's one of my favourite cuts in cinema history. Up there with the Bone to Satellite shot in 2001, and we cut from the butt shot into another butt. Shout out to Canadian lad for pointing out you can actually catch the guy who shot Deadpool sneaking up in the wing mirror of the car, which is such a cool detail. This takes us into the pizza scene, and the boxes have the words Feige's famous in a nod to Kevin Feige. This pizza scene was put in as a direct nod to issue 10 of the 2008 run, with the dialogue and shot composition being almost identical. I love how we then jumped him in the street with sunglasses, showing that he stole them from the guy in the prior scene. Turns out he's protecting a girl named Megan, which shows he's a bad guy but he's got a heart of gold. Probably always subscribes, and the YouTubers he subscribes to, they love him so much they give him discounts even when they're buying Blu-rays. Right now, we've teamed up with Arrow Films, who sell lots of 4K classics like RoboCop, and they've just launched Carrie. If you want 10% off, just head to our link in the description and use the code HEAVYSpoilers at checkout. Shabow! Now from here we cut to the Sister Margaret's bar for wayward girls. This mercenary bar is a play off Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, with it also containing a cameo from creator Rob Liefeld. We then get these lines at the bar playing off X-Men Origins, which in itself was a reference to Full Metal Jacket.
It's traveling to exotic places, Baghdad, Mogadishu, Jacksonville, meeting new and exciting people. All I ever wanted was to travel the world, exotic places, meet new and exciting people. And then kill them.
Killing them. Yeah, I've seen your Instagram. So
I wanted to see exotic Vietnam, the jewel of Southeast Asia. I wanted to meet interesting and stimulating people of an ancient culture and kill them.
After starting a bar fight by buying Buck a quote-unquote blowjob from another dude, we see a Deadpool on the wall. This has got the names of the following on it: Bill Cosby, Charlie Sheen, Kanye West, Wade Wilson, Vladimir Putin, Jay Booth, Ryan Reynolds, TJ Miller, obviously very fourth wall breaking there, Lindsay Lohan, Miley Cyrus, K-Rock, Mike Tyson, Jay Nelson, Lil Wayne, Shia LaBeouf, Ned Beatty, Rob Liefeld, Ozzy Osbourne, and Amanda Bynes. Struggling to read that with my bad eyesight, and originally Amy Winehouse's name was going to be on this board, and there was going to be a running joke throughout the entire movie. This script can be read on Internet Archive, with the singer's name being mentioned 6 times throughout. It would see us getting cutaway scenes in which he almost died that will lace throughout the movie. Then for the post-credit scene, we'd see her get run over by a double-decker bus, with her body getting sprayed over Trafalgar Square. Sadly, she died in 2011, and thus they removed it due to it being distasteful. Now from this point we then meet Vanessa, who's a character that comes from the comics, in that she was also a prostitute, but Baccarat ended up wanting to flesh out the role. In the comics, she ends up becoming Copycat, who's a Mystique-type mutant with the power to shapeshift. Olivia Munn was originally in the part, but she backed out in order to play Psylocke. Both this and Apocalypse were produced by Simon Kinberg, with her audition here helping to open up that door. Anyway, this whole scene of them going back and forth is a reference to Monty Python's Four Yorkshiremen skit.
Childhood.
Rougher than yours. Daddy left before I was born.
Daddy left before I was conceived.
We used to live in a tiny, tumble-down old house with great holes in the roof. House? You're looking to have a house? We used to live in one room, 26 of us. All there, no furniture, half the floor was missing, and we were all huddled in one corner for fear of falling.
Room? You were lucky to have a room. We used to have to live in the corridor.
I watched my own birthday party through the keyhole of a locked closet, which also happens to be
Your bedroom. Lucky I slept in a dishwasher box.
You had a dishwasher.
John Cleese is of course a founding member, with his Fawlty Towers character getting a reference later on.
Is it Basil Fawlty?
Monty Python were also given a nod when Deadpool fights Colossus, with it riffing off the back of the Black Knight sketch.
I promise this gets worse for you, big boy!
This is embarrassing.
All right, we call it a draw.
This includes nods to RoboCop.
Dead or alive, you're coming with me.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
And Reynolds is home in Canada with the Canadian national anthem.
Canada!
Poole also does what some animals do when trapped, and he cuts off his limb in order to escape. During this he says,
"Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret."
This is a reference to a novel by Judy Blume, which is about a girl getting her first period. Match that with the blood spray, and you get that, mate, you get that. Anyway, we cut to a fake-out shot of Vanessa and Wade having sex, which is revealed to be at an arcade. Cashing in his tickets, we can also see a dog up on the top shelf with a red mask and black eyes. This is a nod to Dogpool, who we know is going to be appearing in Deadpool 3 because Ryan Reynolds posted about it on Instagram.
Spoiler alert.
During the love montage scene, we then see them sitting about reading, with Wade diving into the memoirs of Mario Lopez. This is a reference to their April Fool's video in which they announced the movie would be R-rated.
And I heard the movie studio just announced that they're aiming for a PG-13 rating.
Yeah, we're working to. We're working to keep the spirit of the comic book alive. Though,
I think
no
it's
matter
smart,
what.
man, that you guys keep it family friendly. Because
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go, so far as to say it's, family friendly, but
bottom line, Ryan, there may be a billion reasons to make a family friendly movie, as in sequels and toys. And listen, Ryan, if you
Fuck you, Slater. April Fools.
Deadpool will, of course, be rated R.
Wade also ends up posing with a ring pop, which was a bit of a meme at the time, but it took off later during the pandemic when couples couldn't really leave the house. Vanessa then says, "Ride a bitch is back like Yoda on Luke," which he signifies his empire, and Wade then says,
Jesus Christ, it's like I made you in a computer.
and this is a nod to weird science, you get that, mate. Now, getting his cancer diagnosis makes him realise how much he loves her, and it's in this he sees how much he's going to lose. We then cut back to the highway and get more of a focus on the X before Deadpool then kicks the crap out of Francis.
That's why Regina rhymes with fun.
Now, this is a saying that became famous after Mick Jagger used it to describe the town during a concert. This was originally where the motorbike chase was going to go down now, with the budget then making them reduce it to what we get. We then get this line.
Yeah, like I got bit by a radioactive Shar-Pei.
Now, obviously, mate, this is a reference to Spider-Man who got bitten by a radioactive spider. However, the Shar-Pei itself comes from Deadpool comics when he said he looked like Ryan Reynolds crossed with a Shar-Pei. This has since made Reynolds think he was destined to play the role, and we then get a call back to his own previous iteration. That happens when Colossus throws Deadpool, and we then cut to a figure from X-Men Origins.
I think we can all agree that shit just went sideways in the most colossal way. Well, maybe not the most.
This is obviously a nod to Colossus, but also how much that movie nearly fucked everything up. Back with Vanessa, we see two Broadway references, with Wade wearing a shirt for rent. Vanessa also holds up a purse with Bernadette Peters on it, who starred in several Broadway shows. Rent has the character Roger dying from HIV, with it being a prolonged illness that was picked to mirror Wade's cancer. We were originally going to get several scenes of him seeking out treatment that would see him going across the globe. There's a deleted scene of him going out to Mexico, where there's apparently a miracle clinic. This is said to feature a doctor who performs psychic surgery, but Wade quickly realizes that it's just a con. Wade ended up killing the doctor, and at this point he then left Vanessa. He'd also start to reconsider the recruitment officer's offer, whereas they just have him looking through leaflets and then meeting the agent. We then cut to the rain on the windows, which is where he decides to go to Weapons Plus. Now, back at the bar, he gets handed a card with the agent's phone number on, which is the same as Kevin Spacey's character during American Beauty. He also looks like Kevin Spacey, whose character sleeps with a high schooler in that, and this is why he keeps calling him a
Nonce.
which, yeah, we know what accusations came out a couple of years later. We also get a reference to Jared from Subway right before he kills him as well.
Nice to see you, Jared.
And Deadpool calls him Agent Smith, which is actually a pretty good Easter egg if you add the shades. In the subtitles, he's called Agent Smith as well, and at the hour 3:35 mark, we see that Wade's called him that on a post-it note on the wall. At home, he excuses a nightmare as dreaming that he kidnapped Liam Neeson's daughter, which is obviously a reference to Taken. However, there's a slightly deeper cut here, as Neeson starred in the final Dirty Harry movie, which is called The Deadpool. This is what gave Rob Liefeld the idea, and it's where he got the name from the character. Moving on, we then cut back to the freeway, where Wade really lays into the X-Men. The Heaven's Gate reference is to Marshall Herf Applewhite, who's known for organising the largest mass suicide as part of his cult. Watched a documentary on him last week, and yeah, it involved Christ being an alien and their leaders saying they were aliens as well. I think got really weird, but I think it was them saying that it might be how Charles is a mutant and so on and so forth. Again, sorry having to bleep all this stuff as well. YouTube's just a nightmare at the moment for demonetization with us. They even gave us a yellow dollar for showing vampires in Blade 2. You know what I'm saying? It's terrible. Now, Colossus then says he's going to take him to the professor, with Deadpool saying,
Let us go talk to the professor.
McAvoy or Stewart? These timelines are so confusing.
You get that one, mate, you get it. And he also talks about 127 hours before sawing off his arm. He then jumps into a garbage truck, and we get another great transition into the past. This sees him being wheeled into the lab, which is where they'll trigger his mutation. We also get a big nod to Green Lantern.
And please don't make the super suit green. Or animated.
Now, it's also important to note that chronologically, the fourth wall breaks only come after these experiments. In all the scenes where he's normal, they just keep him as a standard character, but after this is triggered, he talks to the audience. Down in the lab, we see the mutant Marrow, who has spikes sticking out her back. Marrow is the leader of the Morlocks, and she possesses bones that grow out of her skin. Here we also meet Gina Carano's Angel Dust, who in the comics also joined the Morlocks. Her powers in the source material are based on adrenaline, which causes her to quickly develop super strength. However, this makes her tire really easily, which is why she ends up becoming exhausted when fighting against Colossus. We also learn Ajax gave Deadpool his powers, whereas in the comics it was caused by Dr. Kilbrew. Ajax was mainly his henchman, but they just pushed the two characters together so they could have one main villain for the film. At this point we see him getting the serum, and you can also notice drops of blood within it. The comics had Wolverine's blood being used in the experiments on Wade, and this is what gave the character his healing factor. It saw that this could be how Wade gets it here, which ties in neatly to the end of X-Men Apocalypse. That post-credit scene has his blood being taken, which may explain how the lab was able to get it. The blood was of course also used for Logan, with it being how they made X-23. Maybe I'm doing a bit too much for Fox though, because let's be honest, them Fox never cared about continuity, but they just trying to draw stuff together here. Ajax makes a joke about sewing his mouth shut.
Well, sew your pretty mouth shut.
Which is of course a reference to X-Men Origins. Deadpool at this point is tortured to trigger his abilities, but on this watch through, I wonder if it had already kicked in. That takes us into now he of course has a healing factor, and they mention how they keep putting him through worse and worse pain to get it to begin. Sorry guys, I'm just a moron, but I make myself laugh at least, even if no one else does. But I actually wondered if he was able to get through this because he's constantly healing, and thus they have to then up things. I wonder if his skin changed because his blood cells were filled with oxygen, and then his body was trying to heal them, which is what then changed his appearance. You know, it's a few times a crap theory, but I thought I've dropped a theory and it's completely rubbish. Now we also meet the character Cunningham, with this being an nod to the comics character David Cunningham. In the source material, that's the character Worm, who was also the one that gave Deadpool his name. He ended up dying after Ajax pushed the experiments too far, and Wade snapped his neck as a sign of mercy. Here he sets fire to the lab, and Cunningham looks at him almost like he's thankful that he's finally out of his misery. Just watching Wade get put in that suffocation machine, it's genuinely something that's always stuck with me, and I can't imagine how agonizing it would be being stuck like this for days. Normally they'd pussyfoot around this sort of stuff, but here they really go all in with it. Ajax reveals that they're actually making super slaves, and that he'll be fitted with a control collar and sold to the highest bidder. These collars appear at the 1 hour 7 mark, and I wonder if the ones that appear in Deadpool 2 are also related to it. Fighting amongst the fire, the scene always reminded me a bit of V for Vendetta, which we will cover on the channel at some point, but it'll probably be about November because that makes the most sense. I did just get the new Mondo 4K Steelbook though, and yeah, I'd love to do that on a breakdown because it's absolutely perfect for one. Now that film's origin story had a Phoenix metaphor too, which carries across here to Wade, who rises from the fire. Seeing Vanessa, he goes to return to her, but decides against it after seeing people's reaction to him. Now at this point, they were going to get some scenes riffing off of Groundhog Day, and we'd see Deadpool constantly trying to off himself. He then keep waking up in the morgue, and come to realise his healing factor made him near invincible. There was a deleted scene of him getting run over by a bus, but they cut this moment out and then skipped over the montage. Back at the bar, they then start brainstorming names, including Scaredevil, which you get that. We then get Deadpool hunting down Francis and can see from his photo on the wall that he wears a crown of dicks, wearing white the blood becomes impossible to wash out, so in the end Wade starts rocking red. They also have a little nod to Deathstroke in his very first costume, which we can see as just a single eye slit. Deathstroke's real name is Slade Wilson, with Deadpool borrowing heavily from the character. In the background we also hear the Deadpool rap, which is building off the back of the Deadpool game. That had its own rap to it, and Tim Miller got the group back to record one for the movie.
They call me Deadpool, I'm hella fast. Can I mark the bad guys and get some ass? Got blades for days, got guns galore, got combo moves, evades and more.
Slowly he runs over someone on a Zamboni, and we then cut to a drawing of him, which even has Zamboni guy written on the post-it note. It's in this montage that we also meet Blind Al, with her listening to blind singer Ray Charles when we cut to her apartment. Later on, Deadpool says,
And also, there's about 116 kilos of cocaine buried somewhere in the apartment, right next to the cure for blindness.
And cut to Deadpool 2, and I love how we get a call back to this, as we can see both the drugs and cure for blindness hidden under the floorboards. Just behind them we can also see a finger statuette, which is actually the flying fickle finger of Fate award. This was presented on Laugh-In, which is where it was given for the most ridiculous news item of the week. Now when Wade gets back to his apartment, we see he covers his severed hand with a red towel. At the hour 6 mark, he swaps this out for a clean one, which we can see is cream coloured. This shows that this other towel's red because of blood, showing that he's used it a lot before. Slowly his hand's starting to grow back, and the VFX artist looked at fetuses to see how they formed in the womb. Inside the apartment, he picks up a unicorn and a bottle of lotion, which we kinda know what he's up to because we caught him in the fast forward section at roughly the hour and 4 minute mark. Cut to Wade then going to the strip club, which is where we get our Stanley cameo. Stan jokingly said he was annoyed they didn't let him film at a real one, with this scene being done on a closed set. This was then spliced up and then dropped into it, and from here we see as Ajax kidnaps Vanessa. Realizing she's gone, it then leads to Weasel saying,
"Go get her, Tiger."
This is of course a nod to Mary Jane, who constantly says things along the same lines to Peter Parker. Deadpool also says it later on to Negasonic,
Go get her, Tiger.
which takes us into the quote-unquote helicarrier with Deadpool and co walking out to DMX. X Gon Give It To You carries a double meaning, as X could mean the X-Men and they all possess the X gene. The scrapyard itself has several X's in it, with there being 3 signs for their company Amix. We can also catch 4 crossing signs which are all carrying an X, and on top of this, after the superhero landing, we see that Angel Dust's back has straps on it that make an X. Now from here, Negasonic burns through her clothing to reveal her X-Men suit below it. This is pulled straight out of the comics, and it reminded me a lot of the ones from the Grant Morrison run. Miller apparently fought to get this in the movie, as Fox was still wanting to go with those black leather suits.
What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
Yes, actually. Yes.
I love this action scene with the superhero landings, him spelling out Francis, and also using Negasonic to push him up to the helicarrier. Leads to a big fight, and at this point Deadpool battles Francis, while Vanessa's put in the suffocation machine. On the ground, Negasonic and Colossus take out Angel Dust, and after causing the carrier to crash, Deadpool kills Francis. What I love is that this is with the gun he got from Blind Al, which in that scene he almost didn't take. We then see Colossus start vomiting, and this was apparently a nightmare for motion capture artist Greg LaSalle, as he had to keep retching over and over and over again. Miller said he had to step in and tell him to stop because he was retching so much he was gonna pass out. Deadpool then says,
Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm just a boy about to stand in front of a girl.
Which is a play on Notting Hill.
I'm also just a girl standing in front of a boy.
He then takes off his mask, and we can see it's got Hugh Jackman's face cut out from the cover of the Sexiest Man Alive magazine. Ending the movie to Careless Whisper, we then jump to the post-credits scene riffing off the back of Ferris Bueller. He comes out wearing the bathrobe, and even makes his sound. This is from the song Oh Yeah by the band Yellow, which featured in one of the most famous scenes in the movie. Deadpool also says Cable will be in the sequel, which, as we know, came true with Josh Brolin. Lastly, he says, we're expecting Sam Jackson to show up, which calls back to the post-credit scene that arguably started the whole craze. Anyway, that wraps up the movie, and it went on to have great success.
It lives up to the hype, plus.
Fuck it, they probably won't even make a 3.
Yeah, why would they? Stop it too. You killed it.
Teased in the post-credit scene for part 1, this sees Cable appearing in the film, played by none other than Josh Brolin. Brolin was also in the role of Thanos, which even gets a little joke later in the movie.
Zip it, Thanos. We have a deal, and you
The sequel ideas were in the works even before the first film released, which is why we got the tease at the end. Simon Kinberg worked on a number of X-Men films and said that he wanted to bring in Cable for a long time. They were floating around him showing up in Days of Future Past, but after all that fell through, it gave room for Deadpool. The sequel had yet to be greenlit, but the creatives still started brainstorming things early. Now that the first film was such a big hit, Reynolds had extra clout, and because they hadn't drawn up contracts, he had a big opportunity. In the end, he negotiated more creative control and had complete casting approval. This caused Tim Miller to step back, as he felt he and Reynolds clashed over where to take the movie. He wanted to take things more in line with the first one and have it be slightly more grounded than what Reynolds was planning. He also wanted Gina Carano to return, and for Kyle Chandler to be in the role of Cable. Vanessa would also have further development and become copycat like how she is in the comics. Marina Baccarin also said she felt like the character was a victim of fridging, with this term originating from Green Lantern 52. In case you don't know, Kyle Rayner found his girlfriend's body in a fridge, with that then becoming his driving force in the story. Fridging basically means when a female character is introduced just to be killed off so that they can help the main character have motive in the story. Writers Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick denied this though and said they had no idea what fridging was, and originally she was just going to break up with him. This was obviously changed though, and lastly in Miller's version, Juggernaut would fight the Thing, with Fox even approving use of the character. On the other side of this, Reynolds wanted the humour turned up to 11, and to take things in a different direction with Cable. At the end of part 1, he also mentioned these names.
The sequel? We're gonna have Cable. Just need a big guy with a flat top. Could be Mel Gibson, Dolph Lundgren, Keira Knightley.
Lundgren was really interested as well, and he posted fan art of himself on Instagram posing as the character. I'm not sure if that was just a joke or what, but other people involved included Michael Shannon. David Harbour screen tested for it too, with Pierce Brosnan also getting close as well. Brad Pitt was almost really close to it too, but scheduling issues ended up in the way. He said to MTV News he'd taken the superhero genre as far as he could take it, and thanked Reynolds for giving him a role that he was able to bring justice to. In the end, it of course went to Brolin, and it's going to be interesting to see if he comes back down the line. He has signed on for a 4-picture deal, with there now being 3 more appearances he's obligated to make. As for the other aspects, it apparently caused conflict at the studio, and Fox chose Reynolds over Miller's wishes. This then brought in Domino, with a role being highly sought after. Aubrey Plaza, she almost got out, with Zazie Beetz winning out in the end. John Wick's David Leitch was brought on to direct, with that distinctive action style being present in the movie. That gets a little nod in the opening credits, when we can see his name's listed as one of the guys who killed John Wick's dog. Never forget! Never forgive! And the budget was also doubled to $110 million, but there were a number of things that they couldn't get to work. Mr. X was initially going to be the villain, but they felt that they couldn't balance him with the others present. There was also Black Tom Cassidy and Sluggo as well, but their roles were cut down to be just minor ones in the movie. And the movie was released with 3 different versions. Firstly, there was the theatrical, which also dropped on Blu-ray, and along with that came the super duper extended cut. That's the version I'm going to be watching for this breakdown, as that has the most details in it. There was also a Christmas PG-13 version released as well, but yeah, we're going hard and uncut for this one. Ow! Now we begin as always with the Marvel logo, which then transitions into a lighter sparking up. We then see Deadpool smoking a cigarette, which he'll use in just a minute to blow himself up. We can also catch him winding up a musical toy of Wolverine's, speared on a branch like his death scene in Logan. This ends up coming full circle in the final scene, as they use the same music in both Deadpool and Logan's death.
There's one out there for you. Just keep looking, okay?
Deadpool also says,
Fuck Wolverine. First, he rides my coattails with the R rating. Then, the hairy motherfucker ups the ante by dying.
And I love this tongue-in-cheek joke, and to be fair, you have to admit that Deadpool opened up the door for R-rated comic book movies. According to insiders at Fox, it was only once they saw how well Deadpool did that they decided to go that direction with Wolverine. Now we look about the apartment and can see some mementos from the first film. There's Wade wearing a cap like how he did at the laundromat, and also a shot of Vanessa and Wade's first date. We can also see them wearing Christmas hats, with that first film originally being set during Christmas. There's also a Canadian flag, with Reynolds of course being from the country.
Canada!
In the background we can hear the song All Outta Love by Air Supply, which Reynolds also sang in Van Wilder. Before blowing up we can see his blue coloured Crocs, which were also something that he wore in the first film. Both him and Vanessa are also shot in the heart, which symbolically brings their 2 deaths together. Cut to 6 weeks prior with Deadpool going on a killing spree, and we get a shot of a skyscraper with a Japanese sign on it. These characters roughly translate to Deadpool, with the first of them being death. That also taps into the themes of this movie, with Wade longing to die so he can go be with Vanessa. Listening to X Gon Give It Here, this song of course appeared in the first movie before the final battle. There was used to highlight they were X-Men possessing an X gene coming from Xavier's mansion. Here it's used to amp himself up, much in the same way Shoop was used in the first film. We can catch our little portable player here too, with it having Wade written on it like how it did last time. Calling his target, he then pulls up a card which, according to Dub18 on Reddit, has the word Red Lotus on it. Red Lotus is a villain from the comics, with him being a mutant who ran the Sydney Triads. Cutting up the forces to Dolly Parton's 9 to 5, it really sets a tone for this montage, and after slicing them up, we see him popping out a coffin, which reminded me a lot of the level in the PS2 Punisher game.
It's the Punisher!
Deadpool also references Ace Ventura.
Woo! Do not go in there!
Do not go in there! Woo!
And the extended cut has a line about Captain America.
Well, let's see Captain America do that.
Cut to the strip club, and we then see him wearing a blonde wig and heels. This was put in to be a nod to Lady Deadpool, with it also being rumoured she'll appear in the 3rd film. Cutting to a bathhouse in Osaka, this was extended for the longer cut, with us getting the camera rotating around him several times. Leach was gutted they had to cut it for the theatrical one, as it took a lot of work, and it really shows a step up from the first film. They're way more creative with the staging here, including him chasing a dealer through a warehouse, which is all done in one take. We then see him with his Adventure Time watch, which is also something that he had in the first film. Cut to him running to the taxi in a shot that resembles the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Here we see Dopinder listening to a Tony Robbins self-help tape, with this being something that drives him throughout the movie. Now, in case you missed our first video, Dopinder was someone Reynolds named after a kid he went to school with, who unfortunately died after being struck by lightning. Deadpool also calls Dopinder Goose, with him being the co-pilot from Top Gun. Tom Cruise films get referenced throughout the movie, with him constantly bringing up Interview with a Vampire.
And then remember the movie Interview with a Vampire?
Don't want to.
When Tom Cruise fed 10-year-old Kirsten Dunst's blood for the first time.
One of Ryan's early films, Dick, had him making out with her, and Brad Pitt of course also starred in that movie too. Here he also brings up how he's now mentioned in the same sentence as Jesus.
No, I'm talked about in the same sentence as Jesus. Passion of the Christ, then me.
With this referring to the box office returns, in which Passion was the highest R-rated movie domestically, whereas Deadpool beat it abroad. Going back home, we see as Deadpool gets out of the taxi and can catch on the advert that this is for Alpha Flight. There's the Canadian Maple Leaf flag there as well, with Alpha Flight being a Canadian comic team. Deadpool then says,
"You're right. I was fighting a caped badass. But then we discovered his mom is named Martha too."
Why did you say that name?
You get that one, you get it. However, the plot of this movie also somewhat plays off those versus type movies, because we have two heroes fighting each other that then have to team up. He also gives Vanessa an arcade token, which is where the pair had their first date. Again, it comes full circle, as it's kind of what brings them together due to how the token comes around again at the end. Vanessa says her baby factory is open, and the writers confirm there was a script where they had a son. However, they realise that due to the humour, it just wouldn't work, and they ended up excising it from the plot. They then sit down and watch Yentl, with Wade constantly pointing out how it sounds just like Frozen.
Papa, can you see me?
Does this song sound familiar to you?
Do you want to build a snowman?
Now, the creative team ended up kicking themselves on the commentary as they realised that Barbra Streisand is married to Josh Brolin's dad, James. You know James Brolin, mate, you've seen Westworld, he looks like Christian Bale throughout the entire thing, but either way, they said they'd completely forgotten to include it, even though it would have been a perfect meta joke. Deadpool later wears Chunks of Wine shirt from the Goonies, which he has when he's talking to Cable. Apparently that was something they also forgot to mention, and Brolin himself didn't even put two and two together. However, Deadpool does call him,
Give me your best shot, One-Eyed Willie.
which is a reference to the pirate from the Goonies. So at least I didn't miss that, and Wade then compares his daddy issues to Luke in Star Wars, which Vanessa then corrects to being Empire.
Baby, that's Empire.
This is a callback to this line from the first film.
Star Wars jokes.
Empire.
Now, the whole discussion here is about how kids make you a better person, which in many ways Russell ends up doing. You see Deadpool putting some food in the microwave, with the shot set up being the same as right before he blew himself up. This brings the moment full circle, and his death or attempt at it mirrors Vanessa's. Grabbing her killer and standing in front of a moving vehicle, we then cut to a James Bond-esque opening scene. I felt like there was a bit of a reference to Bond in the first film when Wade introduced himself as this.
Dopinder.
Pool. Dead.
Now, this song's of course sang by Celine Dion, and it was also used to help with the pacing. Leach felt if they went from Vanessa's death straight into the story, that it would feel like it didn't carry impact. However, doing this gives it room to breathe, and thus we can feel the weight of her passing. During this, we can catch his swords coming towards the camera, and on the bottom can see the words B. Deadpool's swords are named both B and Arthur because the character's a big fan of Golden Girls. He also wore her t-shirt with a face on it in the first film, and as I've been saying, it's all connected. Now, if you think it's all connected, then make sure you check out our Kevin Feige shirts right below the video. All goes towards helping videos like this get made, and you'll get at least one new mate out of it. Me. So good luck with that, and thank you. Now, just like the first movie, all the credits listed here are little tongue-in-cheek jokes about what's going on. Most of them are just shocked reactions and anger over Vanessa being killed, with one even saying Ryan Reynolds didn't want to share the spotlight. Realising David Leitch directed this movie, it also made that little one about John Wick's dog hit a bit more. Never forget! The writers are also known as the heroes of the first one, but here they get a little diss on themselves. The cinematography is carried out by Blind Al, and we also see on the front of Deadpool's gun that it says smile and then wait for the flash. He also does a nod to Flashdance with a chair push, and we also see a bullet in the arcade tokens showing how the movie's gonna end. From here we cut to the Sister Margaret School for Wayward Girls bar, which was a play off Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. Wade says,
George Michael was right, I'm never gonna dance again.
And the first film of course ended with him and Vanessa kissing in a careless whisper. Helped by Buck, this character returns from the first film, with him then telling Wade the 5 stages of grief.
Jesus Christ, Buck. No more speaking lines for you.
Just kills me that bit, because the guy's delivery's so bad.
According to the
Kubler-Ross?
Yeah. According to the Kubler-Ross model,
Deadpool then digs up the floorboards, and we can see 2 things that he talked about in the first film.
And also, there's about 116 kilos of cocaine buried somewhere in the apartment, right next to the cure for blindness.
Love how you've got that cure for blindness there, and Blind Al sits down and pulls out her gun. This is the same one Wade took from her in the first film, and it's also the one that he used to kill Francis with. She tells him to keep living.
You need to just keep living.
Now, shout out to Ryan Harry, Ryan Harry, pointing out this is a reference to Matthew McConaughey in Dazed and Confused.
You just gotta keep living, man.
Shut the f*** up, Ryan Airy!
Trying to destroy himself in as many ways as possible, we see him initially diving into a polar bear pit. He also jumps off a building after drinking Clog Cleaner, and this has Agent K written at the bottom. This is a nod to Josh Brolin's character in Men in Black 3, and he says that he needs to die harder. That's trademark Fox, with Fox of course owning the rights to that franchise. Don't reboot it, please don't reboot it. Now this montage actually builds off the back of the first film, as we were going to get something similar in that. In a deleted scene when Wade goes to tell Vanessa he's alive, he was then going to step out and get hit by a bus. This would then spiral out into a Groundhog Day inspired montage in which he'd keep offing himself and then waking up in the morgue. Grabbed by Colossus, Wade's then taken to the X-Mansion, which has of course appeared throughout the franchise and also in Arrow. From here we then jump to Essex's house, with us getting an extended scene of this in the super duper cut. Kind of feel like this is a metaphor for stuff like conversion therapy, with them wanting to turn mutants back to being humans. At the 36-minute mark, the guy removes his tie, and it's clear they're leaning into some of the uniforms used in religion. Essex's house is also a nod to Nathaniel Essex, who in the comics is Mr. Sinister. Essex Corp have appeared throughout the franchise, as they're the ones who grab Wolverine's blood in X-Men Apocalypse. This in itself was used to create Deadpool, with droplets of blood being spotted in the syringe. Julian Dennison was also the only person considered for the role of Russell, with Ryan crafting the part for him after seeing him in Hunt for the Wilder People. In that, his character Ricky wears a hoodie, with a similar one being brought into this film. Russell also constantly talks about the gangster life, which is something that Ricky does too.
We're like thugs, we're like gangsters. I'm like Tupac and you're like Ice Cube.
Waking up on a couch, you can then see 2 cats on Deadpool's t-shirt. These are Olivia and Meredith, which are actually Taylor Swift's cats. Swift's been mates with Reynolds and his wife Blake Lively, with her including a sample of one of their daughters on the song Gorgeous. Swift wore one of Reynolds' Deadpool costumes on Halloween ones, and it's also rumoured she's going to play Dazzler in Deadpool 3. I'm making this before seeing the trailer or the movie, so if you're from the future and know if she's in, then leave it in the comments below. Lots of time travelling stuff right now. Anyway, Negasonic Teenage Warhead is back from the first film, and this time she's with her girlfriend Yukio, Deadpool calls her.
Especially Pinkie Pie from My Little Pony.
With this potentially revealing that he's secretly a brony. In the comics, she's typically a lot older, but they wanted to lower her age for her relationship with Negasonic. We can see that the two also drink out of cups that both say I'm with her and have an arrow underneath it. Deadpool calls Negasonic 11 throughout the film, and this is of course a reference to Stranger Things. They actually wanted her to have a shaved head again, with it burning off whenever she activated her powers. However, Brianna Hildebrand was working on another project, and thus they just kept it at this mohawk. We see Deadpool spinning around in Professor X's chair, and we were going to get a deleted scene where he tried on Cerebro.
It's a big house. It's funny that I only ever see 2 of you. It's almost like the studio couldn't afford another X-Man.
Which plays off here.
Where the fuck is everyone? It's always just you and Negasonic Teenage, longest name ever.
Although we can see a lot of X-Men members in one of the classrooms. This includes Evan Peters, Ralph Boner, stupid, who would ever do that? Evan Peters is Quicksilver, and James McAvoy is Professor X. This clears up the confusion from the first film, in which Deadpool wondered what timeline he was in.
Let us go talk to the professor.
McAvoy or Stewart? These timelines are so confusing.
Quicksilver is also wearing a Nirvana t-shirt, which was meant to tease that the next X-Men film would take place in the 90s. This was actually shot alongside Dark Phoenix, which is why the cats were able to come together for what's a couple seconds long shot. You also have Beast, Nightcrawler, Storm, and Cyclops. These were them in their 80s and 90s stuff, and this is set in the 2010s, but yeah, lots of timey-wimey wibbly-wobbly stuff, and let's be honest, Fox don't care too much about continuity. And they actually went this direction due to Apocalypse, and for the fact that Patrick Stewart had just been in Logan. That was said to be his final appearance, but as we know, he'd returned for the MCU. He also brings up Angel.
But how about that Potts with the giant pigeon wings?
At this point we meet Cable, with them basking him in a purple light. Little nod to Thanos by the creative team, but what we see is a world akin to the one from Days of Future Past. We learn that his family were killed, and he constantly carries around a burnt teddy bear. This too showed up in the opening credits scene, and it's used as a way to show whether the future's fixed or not. This is something that Back to the Future did a lot, with there being lots of items that change throughout the trilogy. We've covered all those films on the channel, and definitely check them out if you want to see us dive into them. Now, the time travel stuff they do here is sort of akin to Terminator, with Cable travelling through time to try and kill Russell. Deadpool at one point calls him John Connor, and the sound his gun makes when recharging was taken from Terminator 2. Cable also has a scene staring at himself in the mirror, which riffs off the back of when Arnie cut his eye out. Later on, Cable also spins his gun to cock it, and it's similar how Terminator did it when riding on the motorbike. The Days of Future Past adopted the whole going back in time to change things, but instead of trying to kill someone, they were trying to stop that from happening. That's something they said was more in line with Professor X, but Cable, he's just a bloody cold-blooded killer. Now, Russell is said to be the mutant Antichrist, which in itself comes from the comics. That played out in the Kid Apocalypse arc, which itself was a part of Uncanny X-Force. In the comics, Cable's infected with a techno-organic virus, and this makes him able to tap into machines. He also has cybernetic parts, and is very much a child of the 90s. Now, speaking of being a child, he's also sort of the son of Cyclops and Jean Grey. I think. I'm not fully up on all the lore right now, but last scene, which was like years ago, he's sort of a clone son, because Cyclops was his dad, and Madeline Pryor, aka Jean Grey's clone, that was his mother. I think. It's all over the place, but we get a nod to the Pryor later in the prison truck scene, as we can see a van with Pryor on the side of it. According to IMDb Trivia, Leach wanted to include more of his backstory, but they ended up scrapping it because it was just too convoluted. We were going to get a photo with Cyclops and Cable's daughter Hope, but this raised too many questions, and thus it was cut. Hope Summers is actually a big character in the comics, with her being labelled as the Mutant Messiah. Hoping we get to meet her one day in the movies, and that we get a live-action Avengers vs. X-Men.
What's with the creepy, dirty hobo bear?
It's my daughter's teddy bear. Her name's Hope.
Anyway, one of my favourite things about what they do with Cable isn't in the film, and it comes from the Meet Cable trailer.
Maybe the kind that leaves you more machine than man.
Wait, no, stop! What in the actual ass?
Dale, why are the visual effects not done? It's a metal arm. It's not like we're trying to remove a mustache.
Just always kills me that, and I wish they'd left it in the movie somehow, with it being a nod to the nightmare that was Justice League. His time travel device is made from a Carl F. Bucaro watch, with these also appearing in Leach's other films. Those were John Wick 2 and Atomic Blonde, but I couldn't find out why he keeps on using them. We see him flickering through moments in time, and this includes a shot of the Blackbird. This is it later coming over the trees, with this showcasing its arrival at the Essex house. Travelling back, he goes to these two guys, with them being pretty big cameos. These are Alan Tudyk and Matt Damon. Damon's got a fake beard and beard belly and facial prosthetics, and the first time I seen him, I didn't fully recognise him. If you didn't, then you're not the only one, as IMDb Trivia states that the camera crew didn't either. Now imagine being told you'd worked with Matt Damon and then had no idea until he'd left the set. Chumps. Even in the credits, the character's name says Dickie Greenleaf, which is a little nod to the identity he steals in The Talented Mr. Ripley. Now the whole idea for this bit came from an argument Rhett Reese has been making for years, and apparently Ryan Reynolds just had to put it in the movie. They thought the best thing to do was get a highly esteemed actor to deliver the pitch, and Reynolds then reached out to Damon. Damon got so far into the role that he apparently is now a wet wipes guy. He's a method actor, and to be fair, I am too. And don't at me in the comments until you've tried it. We're trying to sell you that as well. Now this is obviously why Ryan Harry's got more subscribers than me, but at this point, Cable steals a 6-pack of beer. Huge shoutouts to Monster Can on Reddit for pointing out that one of the first things Cable does in the comics is form the group's 6-pack. He then also robs a gun store, which is something the Terminator did in his first movie. In the extended cut, we then get a scene where he takes a canister out the fridge and then puts his down next to some name badges. One of them says Wheels, which is a nod to what Logan called Professor X the first time they met. Colossus also says,
Something wrong with the soap.
It's fine. I just filled it. Give it a few more pumps there.
Which hilariously plays off later in the movie.
People think you wake up a hero, ejaculate into a soap dispenser a hero.
Cutting to Deadpool reading a book, this is The Canadian Mounted, which John Candy's character also read in Planes, Trains and Automobiles. Watching a news report, we can then see the ticker has a couple of cool details. The first talks about how there's abnormally high winds expected in the downtown area, which later leads to the death of X-Force. The one that follows it is about how Christopher Plummer refused to do reshoots, which is a little joke about all the money in the world. On that, he replaced Kevin Spacey, with the actors' scenes all being reshot. Now, outside the Essex house, we then meet Russell, who's based on the comic character Fire Fist. We then hear the reporter's name is Irene Merriweather, who is a reporter that comes from the comics. Later on, she appears during the X-Force scene, and she's in the helicopter that kills Shatterstar. We then see as Deadpool becomes a trainee for the X-Men, calling back to this line from the first film.
So what? You're like, his sidekick?
No, trainee.
Stanley apparently hated sidekicks, and this is why you don't really see many at Marvel. He then says,
We're the X-Men, dated metaphor for racism in the 60s.
With that basically being what Stanley created them for, with them being a metaphor for prejudice. Deadpool asks if the Fire Fist burns from the elbow, and later on we see he guessed right. Russell's powers can be seen originating from his elbows and then moving up his wrists directly into the fists.
But I'm not a rapper.
We then get this line.
Come quietly, or there will be trouble.
You stole that from RoboCop.
RoboCop.
But Deadpool's stealing a line from the film during the first movie.
Dead or alive, you're coming with me.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Deadpool then gets thrown into a nearby building and he autographs a box of Hero Flakes with Wolverine on it. Deadpool signs this as Ryan Reynolds, which, yeah, I don't know why, but guessing it's because he's so used to signing things that he automatically does it. Or it's a joke and I'm just bloody stupid. We get the joke there anyway. But the kid here is played by the same kid who plays David Haller in the X-Men show Legion. With that being connected to this, people have also done a theory time, that they might be the same character. Now, if you love the classics, then definitely check out our partners Arrow, who have a ton of amazing 4K Blu-rays on their site. They've just released Carrie, which I watched today, brilliant, have RoboCop on there too, and are also dropping Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is a film I'm going to cover. Use the code HEAVYSPOILERS at checkout for 10% off. That's HEAVYSPOILERS at checkout for 10% off. Shabow! The Deadpool then does the superhero landing, which he has difficulty getting up from. This is obviously a nod to this bit from the first film, with it being really impractical and bad on your knees.
Oh, fuck. Oh, that is so not practical.
Woo!
Superhero landing. Yeah, that's really hard on your knees.
Totally impractical. They all do it.
Quoting that film even further, Deadpool then does the 4 or 5 moment speech that Colossus did in the first one.
4 or 5 moments.
I'm sorry?
4 or 5 moments, that's all it takes.
Fuck it. 4 or 5 moments. I'm sorry? 4 or 5 moments. That's all it takes.
Shooting the orderly that he referred to as Jared Kushner, this makes Colossus realise that he's not X-Men material. Now, Wade and Russell are sent to the Icebox, which is a Canadian super prison that comes from the comics. Originally in the first film, they wanted to use the raft, and a sign for it even showed up in a deleted scene. However, they scrapped that after being worried about Marvel, who were also featuring it during Civil War. As they enter, you can also see a guy with green hair doing a slow clap, which is sort of a combo of Heath Ledger's Joker and the Jared Leto version. As we see the inmates, there's one with long white hair, and we know from the behind-the-scenes stuff that this is Omega Red. That can be seen on a scene on YouTube, and apparently he was gonna have more to do here. However, they ended up cutting him out, along with another mutant in Abyss. We also get a quick shot of Black Tom Cassidy, which somewhat foreshadows Juggernaut's arrival. In the comics, the pair often team up, whereas for this movie, he of course sides with Russell. We also get a nod to the Sorting Hat from Harry Potter, with Deadpool hoping he gets to be in a gang. Cut to Cable, and there's a ticker outside his room, which we get constant cuts to. Managed to read one of them, and it says, cuddling a kitten every day can be good for you, which, hey, I'm glad we're finally getting the message out there. And with the collar on Deadpool, the cancer comes back, and it's completely stripped him of his powers. However, he doesn't want to escape, because this will finally let him be with Vanessa. Approached by Black Tom Cassidy, Russell ends up pulling out a pen, which we saw in the opening credits scene. Deadpool gets the crap kicked out of him, and as he says, he's basically Hawkeye, and we then get further references to Marvel when Deadpool says this.
Grumpy old fucker with a Winter Soldier arm.
This takes the fight to the shower scene, and as Deadpool walks around, we can catch a sign up on the back. This says, conduct cavity searches without warning, which, yikes.
Who are you? I'm Batman.
Which is a reference to this.
What are you? I'm Batman.
And this.
I'm Batman.
Wade also says this and makes fun of his pouches.
Dubsteps on pussies.
You're so dark!
These ain't not from the DC universe.
Now that dubstep line is a constant back and forth they have, whether it's still a thing in the future. This sets up Skrillex's Bangarang, which plays over the fight scene here and later on the convoy. Deadpool also says he has a lot of pouches, which is something Rob Liefeld got criticised for because all his characters had tons and tons of pouches. However, over the years he's come to embrace it and even signs pouches at conventions as he sees it as a good thing.
People who are bugged by it, they nitpick it.
And, you know, a couple weeks ago, I put up all the pictures of things in pop culture or things in reality that have pouches. SWAT units. Guys in the military field have pouches. Isn't that funny? They have pouches. I guess when my military guys have pouches, it's not such a big leap, but it's easy. And you know what I love? I love when people, in the last 5 years, it's happened a lot, they bring me pouches to sign. Brand spanking new pouches, and I sign them or I draw on them. That's cool. You know what? I made a niche for myself. You identify that with me. Something. You know how many artists would love to be identified, period?
After Deadpool pulls the pin on Cable's explosive, they're blown outside, and we get this returning line from the first film.
Rock, meet, bottom. Rock, meet, bottom.
Both ended with Wade falling into something, with the water here taking him to Vanessa. Realizing that it's Russell who's going to make him a better person, he then crawls outside and returns to the bar. They then start to brainstorm recruiting a team that can also carry the franchise for 10 or 15 years.
I'm talking about some Ocean's 14 shit, Rogue 2, John Wick 3, but with the original director.
My body.
Little slight dig there, as though Chad Stahelski directed John Wick 1, 2, 3 and 4, Leach was actually co-director on the first film. However, it's Stahelski who tends to get the sole credit, and though I think they're mates, you know, he's just thrown a little joke out about it because he often gets overlooked. Now back at the prison, Russell goes through the Juggernaut, with him realising he has to befriend the biggest guy there instead of beating him up. At this point, Wade and Weasel go to recruit X-Force, with their first profile being Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We then meet Bedlam from the X-Force comics, and he's played by Terry Crews. Deadpool says he's basically Dave Matthews because he can cause pain and anxiety by distorting electrical fields. Later on, when Bedlam dies, he says "No Tripping Billies," with that being a song by the Dave Matthews Band. We then meet Zeitgeist, who's played by Bill Skarsgård, Rob Delaney plays Peter, Lewis Tan also pops up as Shatterstar, Brad Pitt is the Vanisher, and lastly Zazie Beetz as Domino. She refused to shave her armpits for the film, as she said she wanted to smash the stereotypes that it was weird and gross. According to IMDb Trivia, they envisioned her powers as being like a Rube Goldberg machine on steroids, in which everything seems to fall into place perfectly. It all just works out for her, which Deadpool describes as a 2008 Ryan Reynolds. We then learn that Shatterstar is from Mojo World, which is also a place that comes from the comics. Shatterstar being an alien is also confirmed to us when he gets cut up and sprays green blood. Being an alien basically makes him better at everything than everyone else, and in the end he's sort of like a Superman. Wade says that he wants to find a planet like that, with Weasel then saying,
Isn't that Canada? You shut your goddamn trash mouth.
Again, Reynolds is obviously Canadian, so you gotta stick up for them. I like Canada, been to Toronto 5 times, and it was bloody brilliant. Now shut up for a second, yeah? I don't fully get the Presley versus Kaysen reference in the back, right? But apparently when Elvis was younger, he went to a hardware store and tried to buy a gun. A man named Alan Kaysen convinced him to get a guitar instead, and as they say, the rest is history. Not sure why they're fighting, but on top of this there's also a lot of funny stuff that they did to mess with the audience. They ended up shooting additional action moments just for the trailer with the X-Force, and this was to hide from the audience exactly what was going to happen. In an interview with Business Insider, Crews told them they had to wear blankets and be shuffled in and off set, so that would further go to make people think something big was happening. He said he felt bad because of how excited some fans got, but also loved that the joke was that they all got killed straight away. Their fate is hinted to us when their profiles are put up on the wall, as there's knives in their photos, whereas Domino gets a pin. Peter's also a great standout as well, who had a social media account at the time that used to tweet out really bland stuff. Reynolds was actually behind most of it, and it was such a good way to help market the film. Now from here we cut to the prisoners getting sent out the icebox while Cable interrogates Weasel. He reveals they're going to Jerry Duggan Parkway, which is named after a Deadpool writer who was working on the book while the film was being made. He also warns them there's a wind advisory in effect, which is why Cable doesn't come from the sky.
I warn you. There's a wind advisory in effect.
Turbulent up here.
Cut to Deadpool going through the plan, and we also get a really cool Wolverine Easter egg. Deadpool has him drawn in a cage, harkening back to his time at Weapon X. However, above that we can see some writing that says, Prisoner 2461. That's a number Jean Valjean gets given when he's locked up in Les Miserables, and the character was played by Hugh Jackman in the recent movie adaptation. We can also see below it that it says DMC Prison, with DMC appearing on the trucks when they went to get Russell. Guessing this is like the Department for Damage Control, but instead of that, it's the Department for Mutant Control. You can also catch sequel money with them saying there's no need for a third act. These are joking about how the sequel got way more money so they could add in some big action scenes. In the first film, they had $7 million taken off the budget at the last minute, and thus they had to cut out a big motorbike chase. This made the creative team then rearrange the script and spread the first action scene throughout most of the movie. Deadpool then announces that he was always appalled by the sexism in the name X-Men, and he was angry that they weren't called X-People. I don't know if this is making fun of Victoria Alonso, who called the name outdated, or the Dark Phoenix saying it should be called
X-Women.
Pretty sure this was released before that, but either way, it's played tongue-in-cheek and making fun of people who demand stuff is always PC, and he says their name will be X-Force, with these scenes having lots of references to their comics. Domino calls it derivative, and that's what they were labelled at the time, with them being thought of as a way to revive the X-Men with some new blood. The series also had a big relaunch in issue 116, with it containing a mission in which they all got killed. Their leader was Zeitgeist, with that being his only ever appearance, which is why he has a tattoo that says 116. Later on, Deadpool's suit also gets burned and turns grey, similar to what he wore in his X-Force run. Deadpool then looks at the camera and says,
Laird! Hit it!
Which is a reference to the costume guy that worked on the movie. We then hear the song Thunderstruck by AC/DC, which could be a nod to Iron Man jumping out of a plane to the band's song during his second film. According to IMDb Trivia, Army Captain David Blakely of the Pathfinder platoon used to play this when the Pathfinders carried out jumps. The scene was apparently inspired by a real-life event that happened to Reynolds when the actor went skydiving. Apparently his parachute failed to open on the first try, and since then he's had a phobia of skydiving. As X-Force descend from the sky, we can also see that they line up in an X formation. Domino's the one who pulls her chute last, and this is why she avoids most of the wind. Now, initially, they also wanted them to land in a minefield, but they couldn't explain why one would be there. Everyone gets killed though, and as we see, Deadpool lands against a sign that says Hillside. According to IMDb Trivia, this was the original title of 15, which was the first film that Ryan Reynolds starred in. We can also see another reference to Spinal Tap, with a sign saying Puppet Show at noon. Spinal Tap opened up for a puppet show, and Deadpool here is also hanging like a puppet. When Zeitgeist is pulled into the wood chipper, you can also catch the name Geppetto, which is a reference to Pinocchio's father. Deadpool says the bad news is everyone's dead, but the good news is no one's gonna miss Shatterstar. That's because he was a bit of a prick, as he says, with him also being a dickhead in the comics who doesn't subscribe to YouTube channels. Deadpool then steals a red scooter, which is a nod to Deadpool 68. As Domino comes in, we then get our Stanley cameo, as we can see his face upon a mural. You can also spot a sign that says Bettini Boulevard, named after the visual effects artist who worked on this scene. Here we see Domino's powers in full effect, with Deadpool mocking them for probably not being very cinematic. Have to admit, when I first heard about her powers being locked, I had no idea what that even meant. Sounded stupid, but seeing it play out, it works brilliantly, and it's one of the coolest set of powers I've seen. Deadpool also says,
I mean, luck? I mean, what coked out freak show comic book artist came up with that little chestnut? Probably a guy who can't draw feet!
Which is him making fun of Deadpool creator Rob Liefeld, who often got criticised because he didn't draw feet very well. So lots of YouTube videos talking about it, and he'd often use smoke as a way to help cover them. I like the guy, so not gonna slag him off, and apparently Liefeld loved the joke as well. Cable then grinds down the wall using his arm, which is similar to how Hulk also moves in the Avengers. Jumping on the convoy, he gets on board, and here we see several other mutants. Back here is Black Tom Cassidy, and we also get a cameo by director David Leitch. However, I bet you didn't know that the face model used for Juggernaut was also provided by Leitch. This was then stretched out, and Reynolds did his voice because they didn't have the budget to pay for anyone else. This is why the credits list the Juggernaut as himself, with Reynolds also providing the motion capture. We then get a scene of Domino fighting against Cable, with this being an opposite to how it is in the comics. There she was introduced as a former girlfriend of Cable, and it was Deadpool that she in fact hated. Speaking of opposites, the comics have her with white skin, with a black circle around her eye, whereas here they switch it up. This is sort of like a Domino itself, as you tend to get black and white ones with the colours switched on them. Apparently during the scenes, Zazie Beetz also fainted, with the leather suit cutting off her oxygen. She said that the suit was wildly impractical, and a not so bloody lucky, oh yeah, hey, Now, when Deadpool gets on board, we also get on to X-Men Origins, with Deadpool slicing through a bullet like how he did in that film. Leitch wanted to cut the follow-up where he fails to stop several of them, but Reynolds found it hilarious and insisted they kept it in. When we get a shot from the side, you can see the bullets are hitting him, and this is by all the blood coming out his back. As the truck crashes, Deadpool teabags Cable, which is a nod to the opening of the first film when he did the same thing to Ajax Henchman. Deadpool ends up with his head on back to front, and after turning around he says,
Suck it, Mel Gibson!
That was added in for the Super Duper cut, and it's a reference to Lethal Weapon in which his character Riggs constantly gets a dislocated shoulder. Deadpool then reels off how he's a massive fan of Juggernaut, and he brings up the following comics. Uncanny X-Men 183, which has Juggernaut vs Colossus on the cover. This of course foreshadows the end, and he also mentions Thor 411. Don't know why he keeps saying it like that. I'd just say Thor 411. I sound like an idiot, but that has Juggernaut versus Thor on the cover, with them going head to head with Jonathan. There's also X-Men Unlimited 12, which ironically sees him as a prisoner. Deadpool then says,
You know, it has always been a dream of mine to see my face reflected in your helmet as you charge at me with murderous intent.
A shout outs to Kristen on Reddit for pointing out that this is a reference to a big Deadpool cover. Here we can catch Deadpool reflected in the helmet of Juggernaut whilst he charges towards him with murderous intent. Juggernaut ends up tearing Wade in half, with us then getting a clear reference to The Empire Strikes Back. Domino carries him on his back, which is just like how Chewbacca carried C-3PO. Back home, his legs start to regenerate, with Reynolds being the one that penned most of this scene. Blake Lively apparently came up with the phrase shirt cocking, which is something she'd said to Reynolds before. Won't imagine why that was, but we can also catch the unicorn toy on the couch, which Wade could be seen holding in the first film during that fast forward scene. Don't look at what he's doing. I said don't look. Deadpool then says,
Bip it, Black Widow, I'm flowing.
Which is a reference to, well you get it, with ScarJo also being Reynolds' ex-wife. Cable then arrives and Wade does a basic instinct and crosses his legs, which gets called out by Weasel. Here they have the baby Hitler debate, which is then something that gets brought up in the post-credits scene. Now this was cut from the theatrical release, and that was because it got a poor response at test screenings. The creative team didn't want people leaving with a negative feeling about the movie, and instead they shifted to using the device to fix real-world mistakes. However, the Super Duper cut allowed them to add it back in, and I think it's a hilarious way to play out one of the most asked time travel questions of all time. The scene also really shows us how similar that Deadpool and Cable are. The latter lost the people that he loved too, and Vanessa's death is similar to his wife's. She was attacked in her home just like Vanessa, and both are desperate to get back to them. Deadpool realizes that he too would go back and save Vanessa if he could, however he doesn't want to kill Russell as he's just a kid. Instead he just wants 30 seconds to try and change Russell to take him away from that darker path. However, we see that's going to be difficult to do, as Juggernaut's now the guy that's acting as his mentor. Leaving a supersized store, we can also see it's on fire, showing that Russell is close to getting his first kill. This will be when he gets a taste for it, and will become the man who kills Cable's family. Cut it open his cab, and Deadpool says,
I bet 50 years from now we're best as buddies.
Which is a reference to this from Days of Future Past.
So you were always an asshole. I take it we're best buddies in the future.
Deadpool then says,
Boom! Spoiler alert.
Which is a callback to this line from the first film.
Spoiler alert.
Pulling up to the X-Mansion, Deadpool plays a mini boombox with a song being In Your Eyes by Peter Gabriel. In the first film, he said he'd stand outside Vanessa's house playing Careless Whisper, with both being a reference to the movie Say Anything. You might also notice that he's taped up a suit as well, with there being a lot of it around the waist because he got ripped apart. From here, we then arrive at the school, and if you recognise the seesaws and rides at the playground, then that's because they're from a pretty big movie. That is Terminator 2, with these being the same props used in Sarah's Nightmare. Juggernaut also reveals at this point,
So you wear that helmet because your brother tries to read your mind?
Yeah, but he's in a wheelchair, so even Steven.
Now in the comics, Juggernaut and Professor X are half brothers, and Professor X can of course read people's minds. Getting out the cab, Deadpool says,
Are you Bear God? It's me, Margaret.
with this being an nod to this line from the first film.
Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret.
This was a reference to a book about a girl getting her first period, but here it's changed to Are You Bear God? Russell also dresses like the Unabomber, and we watch as they attack the school. This leads to Juggernaut attacking them, and Deadpool jumps on his back. He says,
Hey, big guy, the sun's getting real low.
Which is of course a nod to what Black Widow says to Hulk to try and calm him down. This was later riffed on in Thor Ragnarok, with both this and that failing to work. We also get a stock sound effect, Wilhelm's scream, which if you're a fan of films, you'll have no doubt heard a gazillion times. I also love how the music in the background's just some choir shouting how it's the Juggernaut, and it's such a cool scene. Impaled through the head, we then hear some lovely music with Deadpool swooning over Colossus. This is a callback to the first film in which he had something similar happen on the not helicarrier while he looked at Vanessa. Deadpool then tells him to go sweep the leg, which is a callback to the Karate Kid. He then says,
Hey, go get him, Tiger!
Which is a reference to what Mary Jane often says to Spider-Man, along with it being something said throughout the first film.
Go get her, Tiger.
Big CGI fight mate at this point, leading to all the orderlies being taken out in a bloodbath. Shoutouts to Has-Been on Reddit for pointing out that at the hour 45 mark we can catch Cable shooting someone in the head, which sprays blood on the camera. Deadpool looks at this blood and then turns in Cable's direction because he can see where the shot came from. Deadpool ends up saving Russell from going down that dark path, and Juggernaut is seemingly electrocuted to death. However, Colossus says he's just knocked out in the final lines, and in the last shot you can see something's going on at the pool. Zooming in on it, you can see him climbing out, confirming that the Juggernaut's still around, cause he's the Juggernaut, bitch! Terrible impressions, and that's why everyone hates the channel more than the other better breakdown channels. Now Deadpool ends up saving Russell from getting shot, showing he used his head instead of his heart. Strapping on the collar, he then makes it so he's the one who has to be his first kill. If Russell's willing to do that, then he's definitely going to be the bad guy, but Deadpool's sacrifice shows him there's good people. Colossus says, "No wait, because of you," which is a reference to the movie Field of Dreams. The film is further alluded to in these death moments, with Wade asking if they're in heaven. Biggest challenge of your life will be trying to watch Field of Dreams without crying, and the whole group does it while Deadpool dies. Drags on forever though, and you can kind of see everyone getting fed up the longer it goes on. So funny in the extended cut because they just keep going and going and going, but finally he passes into the afterlife. Like, get a move on, mate. Now it's from here that we get some major alterations from the theatrical cut, as originally we had an acoustic version of A Ha's Take on Me. The song was used on the Blu-ray menu, with it also appearing in some of the opening scenes. They switched it to the 2017 version with them gender flipping the video, so here it's the man being pulled through the barrier. Vanessa is the one that pulls him through, but he gets sucked back because Cable ends up saving him. Now as for the music in the super duper extended cut, it's a version of Out of the Ashes, with Wade asking if every day can be International Women's Day. That's a callback to the first movie.
International Women's Day.
She also says "Kiss Me Like You Miss Me" Red, with Vanessa then jumping into his arms like how she did at the beginning. Saved by Cable putting the token over his heart. I was wondering, bloody hell, how strong is that token? But it's made from real lead, and we save some from other lead, and we then end with Dopinder getting his hero moment. He kills the headmaster, and finally this family is together, with Cable staying in the past, or present. Now going to the credits, as the little pictures fall away, we get a map of Vancouver, which is where Ryan Reynolds is from. From here we go to the post-credit scene with them fixing up the watch. This allows Deadpool to travel through time and erase all his mistakes. Firstly, he saves Vanessa, which Leach said he wanted to have confirmed due to not allowing the audience to leave on a big bummer note. He also saves Peter and says Fox basically created the X-Force, so legally they could keep Cable as one of their properties. We were then going to get a scene of him urinating on Shatterstar's grave, but they decided to just cut it from the film. We also get some archive footage of X-Men Origins, with Deadpool asking Hugh Jackman to get back in the saddle if he asks him. As we know, that's going to be Deadpool 3, and he also shoots and kills Ryan Reynolds reading a Green Lantern script. Saved us from that, and honestly, it's the greatest post-credit scene of all time, topped off by Deadpool warming up to kill baby Adolf. We see him winding up and clapping his hands, which in itself is a nod to National Lampoons. This is what Clark Griswold did before he got in the pool with Christine Brinkley, which is also something that took maximum effort. Right at the end, it's revealed Deadpool didn't kill him, and he's gonna go get Cable to come do it because he loves killing kids. And that closes out the film, and the movie also stepped things up visually, with them realizing after the first one that the mouth didn't move much. Thus for this film, Ryan did 2 takes for every scene, with one being with the mask and the other being without it. This gave them a better foundation of how to animate it, with it having way more subtleties than what we got last time. We also have Colossus appearing more angular as well, with them updating the model from that first film. Over the credits, we have Team Headkick rapping about X-Force, with them providing the Deadpool rap in the first film and also in the game. Got a claim on the first breakdown for playing that, so I don't want to risk it, but go check it out on YouTube because it's a pretty cool song. Also, forgot to mention that when Cable reveals he's from the future, Deadpool asks what Sharknado they're on. This is later picked up in the last Sharknado, It's About Time. There, when they travel to the future, they ask what Deadpool movie they're on, which is a nice franchise callback going back and forth between the two.
Nope, I'm actually okay, thank you.
Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down Deadpool and Wolverine. The billion-dollar blockbuster broke the bank, and it saw Deadpool and Wolverine's debut in the MCU. Along with this, there were some other returning characters, and it was a blast watching this in the cinema. After making a quick video at the time, I've now had a chance to go back and rewatch it frame by frame to bring you all the hidden details. This will also include all the comic Easter eggs and making of trivia that brought the Merc with a mouth to the MCU. Now we begin, as always, with the Marvel Studios title, but this time there's some brand new insert shots. This includes Deadpool with footage from his first movie being used. We also have a clip of the Marvels there as well, with that film bringing several X-Men characters into the MCU. That released after Multiverse of Madness, which also featured Professor X. So we know that these X-Men exist in other universes, but for some reason they're not in the MCU. I do wonder if that'll be brought up in universe, and there could be a reason behind it that they bring into the plot. Avengers versus X-Men, and that's why they're on different worlds, hopefully. Lastly though, we get a shot of Deadpool in the M doing his come here fingers. Later on he does this in the Honda, and over the top we fade into him humming the theme. The red in the logo then transitions into his costume with darker sections being dotted about it. As we learned in the first film, the character started wearing red because it helped to hide the bloodstains. We then see his studios turns to yellow, with this of course tying into Wolverine. The Easter eggs get better, I promise. Now originally, this film was planned on being called Deadpool and Friend. However, the day before the first trailer release, they decided to change it after a bit of backlash over the leaked title. According to IMDb Trivia, this still cost Marvel a fair chunk of change, as they'd already shipped 9,000 stands to cinema chains with the old title on. Reynolds also apparently wanted to market and release the entire thing as an intentionally bad film called Alpha Cop. This would be about two guys who share a brain and make the perfect cop. People would then go to see this, and 5 minutes into it, they then cut to Deadpool and Wolverine and surprise everyone in the audience. You can see why the studio chickened out, but that would have been pretty funny. Now as we cut into the film, Deadpool tells us how excited he is to be here. Touching upon the Fox and Disney deal, this was what allowed him to get brought into the universe. However, things weren't exactly straightforward, and there was a lot of legal tape to jump through. Reynolds actually went in and met Marvel Studios all the way back in October 2019. However, from what I heard, there was a bit of back and forth behind the scenes. Disney weren't that interested in an R-rated movie, and they also didn't know if the Fox characters were going to sell. Dark Phoenix had a lot of issues, and New Mutants was dumped during the pandemic. Legally, Disney had to release it, but it very much felt like they couldn't be bothered. For a long time, there was of course the rumours of recasts, and then basically starting up the X-Men characters anew. Now, according to IMDb Trivia, Feige was against bringing Hugh Jackman back. He felt like Logan was perfect, and making him return would just hurt that movie's legacy. To top it off, Jackman's one of those actors who feels like perfect casting. It's always risky going back to the well, and even Logan director James Mangold was pretty vocal about Disney milking it. However, the multiverse saga allowed for new things, and variants started popping up. This direction made him think it was doable, and Jackman was eager to return to the role. He said in interviews he was driving, and like a bolt of lightning, he realised he wanted to make the movie. He had wanted to see the two characters on screen since Deadpool 1 because it had looked like Reynolds was doing something new. A longtime friend of him, he'd wanted to work alongside him since that first movie, and the second movie's post-credits scene even teased a team-up. The pair have of course already starred in an X-Men movie together though, with them first meeting on X-Men Origins. This is what began their friendship, though this feels like they're doing it the right way. Now, one of Feige's big stipulations was that he had it on the classic yellow costume. This is something the Fox movies avoided, with Jackman recently explaining why. He said that The Matrix was popular at the time, and the studio thought leather would make the characters cooler. Since then, we've seen several comic-accurate costumes, but the X-Men always seem to jump around. The Wolverine even had an alternate ending in which a more comic-accurate costume would have been teased. But they didn't drop that, and it seemed like we were never gonna get it.
No, you're never gonna get it. Not this time. Never gonna get it.
However, just like a prayer, we had hope. That's not the lyrics, but things did seem more geared towards giving the fans what they wanted. X-Men 97 even made a jab about the leather look, and thankfully we've moved long past that. Now, speaking of costumes, you might notice that Deadpool's has changed since last time. The designers said they wanted to mimic the 90s look and give him bigger black eye surroundings and a lighter shade of red. And from the off, they acknowledged that people have accused them of literally digging up Logan's grave. So what better way to start the movie? Walking through the woods, we also see the overturned vehicle that was caused by Richter and Logan. Along with this, there's also a perfect recreation of his gravesite. This happened in North Dakota, just along the Canadian border, with VFX being used to recreate the background. There's several references to Logan throughout the scene, such as the pebbles covering the grave and X marking it, which was of course a turned over cross. We also have a mug that says "I like me," which is the mug that we later see the TVA clerk holding. As we learn, this story isn't being told in chronological order, which is the style they used for the first film. We also have the tree trunk he hides behind later on, which is what X-24 impaled Logan on. Now, over the top of this, we also see a credit to the company Maximum Effort, which is one of Deadpool's catchphrases. Now Deadpool then sits side by side with Logan's skeleton leaning against the tree trunk. This is where X-24 impaled him on and Logan, and the character then bled out and died. So sitting him here is it's a bit nasty, that, yeah? Now we can also see the serial number at one point, which says 24601. This happens when the skulls launch towards the camera and we can catch it on the roof of the mouth. Now this was the prisoner number for Jean Valjean, who Jackman portrayed in Les Miserables.
Now prisoner 24601.
It was also referenced in Deadpool 2, and it appeared on the map when they were planning the prison escape. Now Wolverine's corpse appearing like this is something that's been present in a lot of depictions of the character's death. In X-Men Forever Volume 2, his metal adamantium skeleton was shown in a similar way. The flesh was completely disintegrated there though, whereas in the film we can still see elements of it. Now the character has come back from this before, so it does make sense that Deadpool would look for him. During the events of Civil War, we watched as he was almost completely atomized down to his skeleton. The character then managed to regrow, so it doesn't seem like this is always going to be the end for Logan. And there was also the death of the Wolverine, but that depicted things slightly differently. There Wolvie was completely covered in adamantium, which left him like a statuesque blob. Now Deadpool then asks him to imagine the residuals, and that nothing will bring him back more than a fat stack of Marvel cash. He moves the corpse and mouths this while also doing an Australian accent. This is a callback to the scene in the first movie where he also did this when talking about funneling Wolverine to get his own film.
And let me tell you, he's got a nice pair of smooth criminals down under. Anyway.
At this point, the TVA arrive and they call him Wade Winston Wilson. This is the character's full name from the source material, and it's the first time it's been used in the film. Wade then hides behind the tree trunk and sticks his hands up saying wait. This is a callback to the first film in which he did this on the bridge.
Wait! You may be wondering why the red suit. Well, that's so bad guys can't see me bleed.
There Deadpool counted down the bullets in his gun, whereas here he's counting down the bones. He tells us there's 206 bones in the human body, with there being 207 if he's watching Gossip Girl. Gossip Girl, of course, starred his wife Blake Lively, who also shows up in this film. She plays Lady Deadpool in the final fight, though the character doesn't unmask. Alongside her though, they were joined by the rest of the family, with the pair's kids playing Deadpool variants. Those are Inez Reynolds as Kidpool and Olin Reynolds as Babypool. Reynolds joked that on set the only person he had an argument with was Inez, and he can't imagine what it's like spending hundreds of millions of dollars and then being put under the pressure of getting kids to do something. We've all been there though. However, who loved these appearances was Deadpool creator Rob Liefeld. He and his wife are apparently massive Gossip Girl fans, and he even based Lady Deadpool on Lively's character Serena. Now in some interviews, Halle Berry has talked about how Blake actually asked her if she'd come back as Storm. Halle said, yeah, if he asked me, but the guy never asked her, which you never forget what they took from us.
Do you know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning?
Deadpool then says he guesses they're getting a team up after all and calls Logan Peanut. This is something he calls Wolverine throughout the film, and it's also the nickname Scott Lang calls his daughter Cassie. Now this leads into Deadpool using Logan's metallic bones as weapons while he dances to Bye Bye Bye. This was renamed on YouTube to reference Deadpool and Wolverine because there's nothing better than that sweet SEO boost. He then mimics the dance moves of NSYNC, and this is the perfect matchup of the original choreography. As for the dancer,
Nick Pauli was his name.
The interviews also explain that Bye 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 wasn't chosen by chance, and it's in fact a reference to X2. There we have a scene where they play it on the radio.
What are you doing?
The band were then brought up in the Ashes video by Celine Dion for Deadpool 2. It ends with her saying, "Beat it, Spider-Man," and Deadpool says he should have asked NSYNC. So it's bringing a lot of these movies together, and this might be a reach here, but Ryan Reynolds was in Blade Trinity, Jessica Biel was in Blade Trinity, and she married Justin Timberlake. It's a reach, but we'll move on. However, the film itself feels like a massive creative journey, as Feige was a producer on that first X-Men film. He was there at Jackman's original audition, and now it's come full circle from that day in casting. We then get a similar scene to the opening of Deadpool, where we see the credits displayed in a creative way around the scene. The creative team deliberately wanted to make this opening as bloody as possible to let you know they weren't holding back because of Disney. This is the first ever R-rated movie released under Disney, and in the past they've always done it through studios like Touchstone. However, from the off, they let you know they're not messing around, and they even have Deadpool shoving a bone into a guy's crotch to make a dick that he then caresses. He also uses Logan's bones like nunchucks and smashes them like the like button. Amongst these names, you might also notice stuff like Aaron Stanford. Even though some of the cameos get more screen time than he does, they kept them out of the way to not spoil the surprise. We also get the TVA arriving through several of the orange doors. Now I've always viewed these as the more scientific version of the orange sorcerer portals. Doctor Strange and co, they use those to get around, and it's possible the TVA have harnessed this in some way. The Tempads could tap into this natural phenomenon in the multiverse and construct them in a way that's a more processed form. The wizards could do it through more natural talents, and that's why one looks like a literal doorway, while the other's more raw. Now we then culminate with him putting Wolverine's claws on his wrists. This is something the character's done in the comics, with his healing factor allowing him to do it. Guy even shoved the claws down through his knuckles. Ow! Here though, he just keeps them on his wrist, but it's a nice little visual nod to fans of the comics. He then looks at the audience and says he's soaking wet right now, which is similar to...
I'm touching myself tonight.
Standing in front of the title, we then pan around to his butt cheeks, which is how we segued from the bridge scene in the first film. There we cut from his butt to another butt, which Reynolds has called the ass-to-ass shot, which is a reference to Requiem for a Dream. It's a technical term now. Here though, they instead use a time travel device that Deadpool gained at the end of Deadpool 2. In the credits, he travelled back in time at the end of the movie, and we see some shots from the prior film. This includes saving X-Force from dying and killing the version of himself from X-Men Origins. There's also the moment he shoots Ryan Reynolds before he can make Green Lantern, which saved us all, saved the DC universe again. The hierarchy's about to change. Now on top of this, he also saves Vanessa. Now from here we cut to March 14, 2018, which was the release date of Despicable Deadpool 296. That story centered around Deadpool ticking things off his bucket list, with this being the end of that journey. So it's fitting the characters now in the 616, with this being what Reynolds and fans have wanted for years. This also dates the scene as being pre-snap, as that happened in April 2018. And this takes place right after Spider-Man Homecoming, in which Happy moved all the Avengers Tower stuff upstate. Due to the recent Thunderbolts trailer, we also now know who purchased the building. Now because of this and the time it's set, there were actually plans to have Robert Downey Jr. appearing here as well. Though we get Happy, there was the idea that Tony could still be here too when Deadpool asks if the man's here. Happy says he doesn't do this sort of thing, and I love how Deadpool says, cameos? We of course get Chris Evans later on, so there was a big notion that we might get these two returning names. Now Reynolds actually admitted to rehearsing the scene with Downey, but they ended up cutting it in the end. This was because Downey was going to be playing Doctor Doom, and thus they wanted to save his return for that. However, I feel happy we get Happy, and it plays in the movie's themes by having Jon Favreau. This is of course a celebration of the Foxverse, and we get several returning faces. This includes Electra, who appears later on in the film with Jennifer Garner reprising the role. Favreau also starred in that movie as well, with him playing that universe's version of Foggy Nelson. Now though they don't share a scene together here, according to IMDb trivia, Favreau was talking about an Iron Man movie on the Daredevil set. It's on this set that he met Kevin Feige, and the two began discussing ideas. This then kickstarted the MCU, and it's the reason everything's here today. So it makes sense having Happy, and like I said, I'm happy. Stop with that joke. Either way, this is the Sacred Timeline, which is a term that was first brought up during Loki. The 616 is now classed as the main line, with all the branches coming out from that. Fans have gone back and forth on this over the years though, as it's also the name of the prime timeline in the comics. Iman Vellani was even a bit annoyed by it, and I tell you mate, amount of comments I've got calling me a dickhead over the years because I said it was 616. You wouldn't like to count them. They call me dickheads for other things as well, but those 616 ones, they really stuck out. Deadpool then asks if Happy was the chauffeur, with him initially starting off as Tony's driver. He also asks if his superpowers parallel parking, which, yeah wait. Now, about the room, we can also see several Easter eggs. As we pan up, we can catch the prototype Captain America shield that was used during Iron Man 2. We then pan to see the suitcase from that movie as well, which we know contains the Mark V. Above this, we can also catch a Mobius strip, which was the same shape that inspired Tony to discover how to time travel. We also have a golden face, which seems like it riffs off an Iron Man helmet. Deadpool also brings up how he was caught smash debating, which involves using those foam Hulk cans like this. You get them, and you get the idea, mate. And yes, I did spend £20 just to do that joke. Now we then cut to Happy sat at a desk. Just nearly broke my camera. We then cut to Happy sat at a desk, yeah, and see lots of other items and objects. Right in front of him is the original arc reactor, with this being displayed in a box. This was done by Pepper and Iron Man, with the line about it proving Tony Stark has a heart. It was then later shown at his funeral, as everyone said their goodbyes. I love you, Tony. I love you 3000. To the top right, we can also see the Forbes magazine with Pepper Potts on the front, which was read by Coldblood in Iron Man 3. We then have the desk pendulum sticks to the far left, which were on Pepper's desk in Iron Man 2. Just behind Happy, we also have Agent Coulson's Captain America collectible cards. These are right next to the Mark II helmet which Tony wore for his test flight in Iron Man. This was later taken by Rhodey in Iron Man 2 and used as the basis for his War Machine armor. Now speaking of helmets, we can see the small plastic Iron Man one from the Stark Expo in the second film. This was worn by the young kid Tony saved, which is now being retconned to be Spider-Man. No idea what Spider-Man's real name is, but its placement here is for a reason, as it's covering up someone on the photo of him and Tony. Now, this photo appeared in Endgame, and it's what Tony looked at before deciding to fix time travel. This photo is from one of their first meetings around the time they were saying he was part of the Stark internship. In the photo, they're holding the certificate upside down, and this inspired Tony to invert the Mobius strip. Now though, there's been a lot of theories that Spider-Man was covered up because he's owned by Sony. I couldn't find anything to verify it. However, Sony are dickheads, so it's probably true. Now we also see a poster for the 1954 Stark Expo, which is what Tony's dad Howard hosted in Iron Man 2. The layout of this gave the guidelines to create a new element, and it allowed Tony to fix his poisoning. Anyway, Wade brings up how he wants to be an Avenger because Vanessa wants him to become something more. Guy's going through his midlife crisis, which is something MCU's going through as well. It's a it's in crisis and it's mid, but Marvel Jesus is here to save the day. Wade also brings up his past experiences, including how he used to be Special Forces. This is something he mentioned at the start of Deadpool, and X-Men Origins showed his work in Black Ops. He also talks about running a team with X-Force, though they lost out to gravity. This of course happened before he saved them with time travel, with all the characters dying in the first drop, except for Domino, but this was a nod to X-Force issue 1 in which all the team died. Deadpool here says they didn't really test well in focus groups though, especially Cable. Brolin was up for returning, but they ended up not bringing him back in the end. I don't know if it's because they're saving him for more Thanos stuff or X-Men stuff, or they're just done with him, but let me know in the comments if they've explained why he hasn't returned. Now Happy makes Wade sad by explaining that people don't join the Avengers because they need to, they join because the world needs them. He says aim for the middle and you're never disappointed. He says he's found his place and is happy, which yeah, nice wordplay. Now this is kind of someone who represents someone who's found happiness, accepting things for how they are. This is the future Deadpool could have if he doesn't reach for the stars, and we see how this is played into where he is next. This conversation though, it further plays into Wade's fears about how he's not needed and just existing instead of living. This is something Paradox wants to weaponize, as he makes him believe he can be a savior. Returning back to his own Earth, this is 10005. We then see him working as a car salesman with the character suiting up. This is him donning his work uniform in quick cuts, which is later mirrored in the suit-up scene at the TVA. During the shots of his locker, we can also see the book the Canadian mounted. Now this is the book that John Candy read in Trains, Planes and Automobiles. In the movie, he also did a speech about how he likes me like I like me, which is on the mug that Deadpool got at the start. Now they also drive around in a rental car, and we see the scorched remains of this down in the void. Anyway, that book has appeared in the prior 2 films, with Deadpool reading it at several points. In those moments, we got a better look at the cover and could see it was red and blue. This red and blue colour scheme is also significant with Deadpool, as he wears blue here at his job. The character later dons red for the job he really wants to do, and it all ties into the suit-up scene. And we see how bored he feels in general, as we see him going along for a test drive. This kind of foreshadows the road trip through the void in which Logan and Wade will ride in a family car. We then see Peter, who works there as well. As we later discover, Peter is kind of a Morty to Deadpool's Rick. Every universe has one, with this Peter saving the day in the end. I also love how they set up the costume in the locker here, as this is what Peter will wear later on. Now shout out to Ryan Airy for pointing out that the pair then travel to the street Walker and Mame, which appears throughout the film. Ryan Airy, he said that this Walker could be a nod to Walker Scobell, who collabed with Reynolds and director Sean Levy in the past. Initially, they wanted him to play Kidpool, but they realised he'd aged out of the role. So potentially, this could be a nod to him, as they weren't able to include him in the film. Now it's here that we also see the TVA agents who are spying on Deadpool. We later learn they're also setting up a Time Ripper, which Cassandra Nova ends up using. And this also highlights the difference in the TVA's tactics since Loki took over. Whereas in the past they used to show up just to prune rogue timelines, they're now operating in them in disguise. With this comes some upgraded uniforms and a really cool detail that you might not notice. In the past, the TVA had their alphanumeric designations stitched into their uniforms, which we saw on people like B-15. However, these have now since been removed, with this showing the agents are more than a number. Arriving home, we then get the surprise party, with it being attended by all those who still love him. This includes Blind Al, Dopinder, Shatterstar, Vanessa, Buck, Colossus, Megasonic Teenage Warhead, and lastly Yukio. I was hoping that Vanisher might be there as well, but alas, that's an L on the theory timeline. line. I don't know what way it is. It's another L. Deadpool then says if this was 6 years ago, they'd all be dead, which references how he saved them through time travel. Who isn't here as well is also Weasel, who is played by TJ Miller. Miller had several accusations of sexual assault levied against him, which led to Reynolds distancing himself from the actor. On top of this, Miller also stated he'd never work with Reynolds again on the Adam Carolla show. This was down to an on-set incident in which he said Reynolds went after him personally.
Would I work with him again? No. And then as the character, he was like horrifically mean to me. So he was like, you know what's great about you, Weasel? You're not the star. You do just enough exposition that it's funny, and then we can leave and get back to the real movie.
So he's riffing.
I mean, his character is kind of that, but yeah, I think even without that, he wouldn't have been put in the film due to what happened. Now Wade shuts down Buck from talking and says, no more speaking lines for you. This is a callback to Deadpool 2 in which he said,
Jesus Christ, Buck. No more speaking lines for you.
And this birthday celebration was also shared on set, with Leslie Uggams celebrating her 80th birthday and even getting a cake for the occasion. Blind Al then brings up how she wants to do some coke. This is a callback to the first two movies, with Deadpool stating he had a couple of keys stashed next to the cure for blindness. This is something we saw under the floorboards in part 2. Wade says though that coke's off limits, but Blind Al starts then going through the nicknames. This includes Forrest Bump and Do You Wanna Build a Snowman. This song comes from Frozen, and it's what Wade sang during Deadpool 2.
Is it just me, or Do You Want to Build a Snowman from Frozen sound suspiciously like Papa Can You Hear Me from Yentl? Papa, can you hear me? But nobody fucking realizes it.
We can also see Peter's nipple chain, which attaches to his hefty spoilers. On the bike ride over, he mentioned how he knew a guy who got his nipples pierced with a chain that attached to his Van Johnson. Wonder who that was. Also, you might notice I've got a light on in the background now. Realised in the first 20 minutes of the video it wasn't on, but we fixed it now. We fixed it. Now, in a further callback to the songs in the franchise, we can also hear Angel of the Morning in the background. Performed by Juicy Newton, this first appeared in the credits scene at the start of the first film. Vanessa also says she's working in middle management, but she's happy. It's kind of riffing off the happy conversation and showing you have to make the most of things. Giving a birthday speech, Dopinder ends up improvising, which Wade quickly shuts down. This is because during the writer's strike, Reynolds wasn't allowed to add any more lines. So ad-libbing was a no-no, and he couldn't allow him to do it. Now Wade ends up making a wish, which is when he gets a knock at the door. This to me is really setting this up as an actual Disney movie, with it being about wishes and dreams coming true. Deadpool's whole goal is simply to matter, and in the end his wish comes true. It's clear that this is all about wish fulfillment, with him wanting to be a hero that matters. Answering the door, he thinks the TVA are here in their kinky uniforms to do some pegging. He says it's not his first time, and this is a nod to the Calendar Girl scene from the first film. He also says the word friendo, which could be a nod to No Country for Old Men when Sugar used it in that tense confrontation. Wade's then knocked out and taken to the TVA in an interrogation scene similar to what we got in Loki. However, Deadpool isn't put in prison overalls, and he hasn't got a collar around his neck. This again shows how the TVA's changed and how the mind state's more open and kind. Whereas in the past they used to trim and prune branches, they're now letting the garden grow. I love how you can also see the staples in his head from where they ripped the wig off. Now Paradox was first introduced in She-Hulk Volume 2 Issue 3. During this run, Jennifer was arrested for warning Clint Barton of his impending death, which took place in Avengers Disassembled. Presiding over her trial were Paradox, Mobius and Ouroboros. This is much like how Loki was tried by Ravonna Renslayer in the first episode of Loki. We've already seen Mobius in the MCU, of course, during the events of Loki, as well as Ouroboros, aka OB. In the comics though, each of these characters were identical and were drawn to resemble comic book artist Walt Simonson. However here, they're all played by different actors, with Matthew McFadden probably coming straight from the set of Succession. Also, every time I say it's McFadden, people say it's McFadden, and every time I say it's McFadden, they say it's McFadden, so comment below. I'm doing it all for engagement, I'm doing it on purpose. I'm a genius! Either way, during the trial, She-Hulk had to prove she was integral to the timeline after her crimes against the time stream. She was threatened with the retroactive canon, which works similar to the MCU time sticks, except this would wipe you out from all existence instead of sending you to the void. However, the villain Clockwise attempted to wipe out heroes after stealing it, with Paradox being caught in the crossfire. Paradox ends up being one of the villains in the movie, and it's vindication for MT, who did one of those videos saying he was the bad guy. But she's smarter than me. A Paradox then takes him to a viewing room where he basically tells him everything he wants to hear. He's a saviour who's destined for something great in the future that will save the sacred timeline. Now through him we also learn about anchor beings, and these are what keep a universe together. We learn that each universe has one, and they're an anchor point that stops the reality from spaghettifying. Around about the release of the first trailer, Daniel OPK actually did an explanation of it, and it turned out to be true. Now in the comics, timelines tend to die for a multitude of reasons, with incursions often being the cause of this. However, you often get branches which are caused due to time travel, where certain timelines fracture off into other timelines. This is why in movies like Endgame, when they went back and altered things in the past, it didn't necessarily change anything in the future. X-Men Days of Future Past operates under different rules, and if you change the past there, it then changes the future. Now when it comes to incursions, these work differently in the comics, and they involve two Earths in alternate dimensions crashing into each other. This then destroyed both of those universes, so the people of those Earths had one of two choices. They could either destroy the other world or destroy their own. It was possible for Earths to phase through each other though, but overall it whittled down the multiverse. Eventually, this led into the events of Time Runs Out, in which there were just a handful of Earths left. Now in the MCU, incursions tend to happen when someone's either dreamwalking or they travel to another world and stay there too long. Their world is then attracted to them, with the world they're on being pulled to that too. So the worlds crash into each other, similar to how they are in the comics. Now Across the Spider-Verse also explain things like canon events, in which an event being changed or avoided caused the death of that timeline. Here, every Earth has an alpha figure who's basically the nexus being of its universe. When they die or they're removed, it starts to decay, and eventually over time it's gonna get wiped out. The process though, it takes thousands of years, but it's a natural part of a universe. I kinda think it's similar to when the Ancient One explained the Infinity Stones in Endgame, and it has a big knock-on repercussion. I think basically in the movie, well, the rules are that if someone's out of place in a world, then it slowly starts to be destroyed. Whether this is someone going on a world they shouldn't be, or people like Miguel O'Hara placing his dead self on another world, it's all things that shouldn't be part of that reality. Either way, long-winded explanation there, but either way, this anchor being in Deadpool's universe is his Wolverine, who we learn has died, in Logan. Now we learn that Paradox doesn't want to wait for this natural process, and he wants to elevate his position within the TVA. He's created a device known as the Time Ripper, which can quickly eradicate timelines. It's similar to what we saw in Loki, with a spaghettification of a universe highlighting its death. We learn he basically wants to save this Deadpool as he's needed for other things and then wipe out the timeline. At this point we see shots from several of the Captain America films, including a moment from the Avengers in which Cap fought Loki outside the museum. Loki was shortly arrested after that, and then a version of him escaped with the Tesseract. This then got him picked up by the TVA and led to the version now holding it all together. There's also moments from the Winter Soldier, Endgame, and the moment they bust through the door in the first Avenger. There's also Captain America saluting, the airport fight from Civil War, and the Avengers money shot from Age of Ultron. Deadpool also does a salute, and in the comics he's also known as being a big fan of Cap. There's also lots of clips from Endgame, such as Mjolnir being struck by lightning, I Am Iron Man, and Black Panther running the gauntlet. However, what has everyone talking is Wade seemingly dying in Thor's arms. This is a play on Thor the Dark World, in which Loki seemingly passed away. They showed this footage at CinemaCon, and people did believe they just swapped out the character, but we can see from it that Thor's arms are covered in armor. He also has a scar and metallic stitches, so it does highlight it's not from the same film. Now we learn that it's something that happens in the distant future, and I feel like this could come at the end of Secret Wars. Now because of this, it's even possible the Void will be altered into Battleworld. In case you don't know, during the build up to Secret Wars, Dr. Doom discovered the threat of the Beyonders. They were a group of godlike beings who were carrying out an experiment on the multiverse. It turned out they'd placed versions of Molecule Man throughout every universe who they were going to use as a bomb. Molecule Man is a Nexus being, and this means that he's the same in every universe. This is much like how anchor beings work here, with it grounding every reality. So what the Beyonders wanted to do is detonate all the Molecule Men at once, which would then destroy the multiverse. Now Doom discovered this, and wanting to avoid Doom, he set out on a mission to follow their plans. Traveling through every reality, he attempted to kill the Molecule Men before the Beyonders could set him off. However, due to the size and scale of the multiverse, this soon became an impossible task. Thus, Doom created a religion in which he garnered a massive group of followers. Known as the Black Swans, these women worshipped his invented deity persona, Rabum Alal. They travelled out through the multiverse, killing Molecule Men, but in the end this had the adverse effect. The Earths they were part of moved out of sync and knocked into other worlds. This then destroyed those worlds and sent out a ripple effect which was almost like the falling of dominoes. Slowly, the multiverse was racked with incursions, with worlds being destroyed one by one. And as things were falling apart, Doom confronted the Beyonders alongside Doctor Strange. He sent the rest of the Molecule Men towards them, and using them as an explosive, managed to kill them all. He then absorbed their powers, and it turned him into a god. I do feel like this is something they're gonna do in Doomsday, with it then setting up Secret Wars. Now, he was desperate to save what he could, and he brought together all the fractions of what remained. This all then went into the planet named Battleworld, which brought across timelines from other universes. I feel like they might change things up for the MCU though, and instead have everything going into the void. This is what it looks like in the background of the scene with Thor, and we do get a nod to this later in the movie. When Deadpool's down on the ground, we can see beside him the cover from Secret Wars 5. That was where Doom became God Emperor Doom, and to me, that's kind of a little nod to what's coming down the line. But we'll see if that theory time turns out to be true, because it might not, because it's a big L. But we did. Have you seen Mephisto's and Agatha? We got that right at least from years and years ago. A shout outs to Eric Voss at New Rockstars for pointing out that Deadpool also wakes up from dreams shouting Thor or God of Thunder. As we learn in Multiverse of Madness, dreams are actually us experiencing our life in other realities. This was shown at the beginning of the movie when Strange woke up after a variant of him was killed in an alternate world. The Deadpool shouting Thor could be him experiencing other realities in the multiverse where he's living out this scene. Either way, Deadpool says the power in the Marvel Universe is about to change, which is a nod to The Rock saying this for like 5 years straight.
Because the hierarchy of power in the DC Universe is about to change.
Wah, wah, wah. That was, of course, teasing Black Adam, which I think was in development for like 20 years. Like, I'm not even kidding yet. Rock was announced as the character back in 2007. The movie, of course, finally brought back Henry Cavill as Superman, but DC had messed him about a bit. They promised him he'd be getting another solo film, and even had writers on Man of Steel 2. After Black Adam underperformed though, they went in a different direction with James Gunn being put in charge of the universe. That led to a new Superman, and I always felt bad Cavill had to put out an Instagram post saying it was over after doing one a week before saying he was back. Deadpool later pokes fun at this mistreatment by saying Marvel will treat him better than those shit fucks down the street. Deadpool also says, with this being a play on I am Iron Man.
I am Iron Man.
Wade then runs off to the side and headbutts the camera. This literal fourth wall break is him announcing he's going to Disneyland, and we now know he's part of the park. This caused a bit of controversy recently as he joked about Disney saying they tried to get a wrongful death lawsuit dismissed because the deceased signed up to a Disney Plus trial. Can't believe Bob Iger showed up to my house and killed my whole family, and I can't do it because I want to see Baby Yoda and the Mandalorian. Like, what the hell is going on? Deadpool is then taken to the tailor, with this sort of being like the scene from John Wick. The scene also reminds me a lot of Batman and Robin, and like that we get a lot of close-up butt shots. During this we can also see his gun spin into his holster, and as we know, due to him pulling it on Wolverine, the front reads "Smile and wait for the flash." This is something we saw in Deadpool 2 when we could see it in the credits montage. Now, upon returning to the control room, Paradox goes through the whole anchor being thing and how the Fox universes was Logan. This is a nice little bit of meta commentary, as over time it became clear how much the movies leaned on Hugh. Hugh Jackman obviously became a big star from X-Men, and for better or worse, the franchise was built up around him. This got to the point I even see people saying they were surprised at how little X-Men 97 used his character. But that's kind of the way it used to be. However, the movies obviously had him as the main lead, except for the prequel stuff, but even then, most of them had to have him in. Best cameo ever! Now, we also learned Deadpool's katanas are adamantium, and this is how they're able to go toe-to-toe with Wolverine's claws. I also love how the TV agents are just sort of the audience here, and they're enamored watching the death scene from Logan. Paradox even mouths along to it and does the death breath. He then goes through how he wants to ascend the TVA and how he's found a way to speed up the process. Destroying timelines with his MacGuffin the Time Ripper, this will mean he gets to further his career. Trillions of lives will be ended before their time though, and he's basically a bureaucratic Kang. Now, this also highlights the division in the TVA, which is something we've seen throughout Loki. Dox refused to side with B-15 and even died while sticking to her principles. They put Dox in a box. There's those that were still loyal to He Who Remains though, and then offshoot characters like Ravonna Renslayer. So Paradox is another splinter within it, and I wonder if these factions will play off in Secret Wars. Boiled down to its most basics though, Deadpool was always going to end up in the Sacred Timeline. However, it would have happened naturally while he was on his own one. This is due to the death taking thousands of years, so Deadpool would have got to that point naturally. However, it's too slow for Paradox, but he needs to save Deadpool from the timeline's destruction due to his important role in the 616. Now Deadpool then escapes the TVA to the song Iris, and we cut back to the scene from the opening. I love when the guy says, "Make it stop," and then Deadpool replies saying, "Mangold tried." Deadpool then ends up bouncing his guitar into the squad leader's mouth after he badmouths Canada. Deadpool says, "Keep my country's name out your fucking mouth," which is taking the piss out of Will Smith.
Keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth!
We then see him travel across the multiverse and get lots of different Wolverine variants. This is to Huey Lewis's The Power of Love, which was used heavily in Back to the Future. That was of course about people traveling through time, and Deadpool sort of traveling through time in the multiverse. Now this isn't the only reference to Back to the Future either. Later on, when Nova's using the Time Ripper, we can see a sign above her head. This says via Lone Pine Mall, with Lone Pine Mall being the mall in that movie. Well, in the eventual altered timeline, Wade also carries a Polaroid of his family akin to how Marty had one throughout the film. Big breakdown of all three movies on the channel now. Now the first Wolverine he encounters is a comic accurate one, with his height being 5'3". One of the only points of contention you'll see with Jackman's betrayal is how he's almost a foot taller than the one in the comics. Obviously there, it was done so he resembled a Wolverine. So this was a little nod to that, with them superimposing his head onto his body. The actor here is Luke Bennett, and I kinda hope the guy gets to show his face down the road. Cutting across to an alleyway that looks part of an apocalyptic timeline, this is also fitting for a reason. Here Deadpool meets a version of Wolverine who comes from the Age of Apocalypse arc. Just like that comic run, he's got the gigantic hair along with a stump for one of his hands. We then jump to what I'm guessing is Madripoor. This is a hangout of Patch, which is an alias that Wolverine goes by. When he does this, he's typically shown as wearing a white tux, and he got his nickname for always having an eye patch. From here we then cut across to a more comic book accurate Old Man Logan. The movie Logan did take aspects from this story, but on the whole it didn't tap into it too much. So this is where we've got a more accurate version with the big grey mutton chops and brown hat and coat. Now Deadpool lands in some red skulls and looks up to see a crucified Wolverine. This is probably my favourite Easter egg in the movie, and it recreates X-Men 251. There he was crucified, but just like Logan's grave, they ended up turning the cross on its side to make an X. Now we next cut to the brown and tan suit, which also looks incredible. This was how Wolverine looked originally, with it being classed as the John Byrne look. Now at this point we get further nods to stuff from the comics, with Wolverine popping his claws. In the reflection we can see the Hulk, with this being a nod to Hulk 340. This was later referenced in the animated movie Hulk vs Wolverine. Hulk vs Wolverine is also something that's been dotted throughout the comics, with Wolvie's first appearance being him fighting the character. That happened in Incredible Hulk 180, which was released in 1974. Now that also means the release of this movie is coming out on the character's 50th birthday. Deadpool then says, "I am a god, you dull creature," which is when Hulk smashes him into a tree. Well, the bottom of a tree. Now this is a nod to Loki in the Avengers, who said that before getting smashed by Hulk. We then get him going to Cavalry, with my cinema going wild when he came on screen. If you've ever been to a British cinema, yeah, you'll know how quiet it is, so it means a lot when people actually cheer. Now this is obviously a really popular fan casting akin to John Krasinski playing Reed Richards. Apparently Cavill got sick to his stomach though in filming this scene because he was smoking cigars for 8 hours straight. We then see as he cocks his arms, similar to what he did during Mission Impossible Fallout. Andy Park also shared concept art of a baby Wolverine, which was one of the scrapped ideas for this moment. Lastly, we see as Deadpool arrives at a bar, which is playing off several scenes. Wolverine was first introduced in the cage fight before he then sat down at a bar. We also saw him at one during First Class, and again, best cameo ever. Lastly, X-Men Origins ended with him at one in Japan, in which he said he was drinking to remember. This bar stuff is also likely going to pop up in the next Wolverine game, as the trailer for that has a similar shot. Shoutouts to IMDb Trivia for pointing out that there's also an amazing little Easter egg. Throughout the film, Logan drinks Jim Beam, Jack Daniels, Johnny Walker and Jameson. These are the ingredients for a 4 horseman shot, and Wolverine played the role of Death in Apocalypse's horseman. We also see from the barman they don't take too kindly to Wolverine, and later on we learn why this is. Turns out the X-Men were murdered by a group of people, and then Wolverine took revenge on humanity. This could have been the Friends of Humanity, who were characters we saw during X-Men 97. Could have also been Stryker's lot, and and it sort of plays off the conversation at the end of the first X-Men movie in which Magneto asks if Charles worries that people are going to come to his school in the night. This is a timeline where that came true and the X-Men weren't able to win. So people don't like him, and to be honest, it doesn't sound like he likes himself either. Now we later learn that he wears his yellow costume under his clothes because it's a reminder of his loss. I love when Deadpool also notices it and says it only took 20 years. Also later on, I really appreciated that he said he's not embarrassed to be in a superhero movie for once. And yeah, those studios, described as the worst Wolverine, they were actually planning on having Deadpool going to recruit a real Wolverine, but the logistics for it didn't work out. Wrexham FC striker Ollie Palmer also cameos at one point in the scene. Reynolds is of course the chairman of the club, and there's other nods to the club in the movie. You might notice one of the Deadpool variants at the end has a Welsh flag on his chest. The credits call this guy Welshpool, and this is the name of a town in Wales. The character is also played by Wrexham striker Paul Mullen, so there's some nice tie-ins to the club. Who didn't make the cut though was Rob McElhenney. Though he's a big actor in his own right, he's also the co-chairman of Wrexham FC. He actually shot a scene as the TVA agent, which was shown in Welcome to Wrexham. We'll talk about that later on, but Logan then gets whiskey claws and fails to pop them out. This is a nod to the opening of Logan, in which he also had performance issues. Popping back to the TVA through a portal, Deadpool then says on your left. This is of course a nod to Falcon and Steve's friendship, with Steve saying it in Winter Soldier. Falcon then brought this full circle in Endgame when he popped out of a portal and said the same thing. So that's kind of playing off that, and Deadpool says this one does musicals, with it being a big nod to Jackman's Broadway career. He also does musical movies as well, and these include things like The Greatest Showman, which we get a nod to in the film. During the fight in the car, Wolverine smashes Deadpool's head into the radio. This then plays notes from The Greatest Showman soundtrack, and we also get a Deadpool variant. During the final fight, we can see one dressed as P.T. Barnum, who Jackman played in the movie. Now Paradox explains it's not just a case of swapping out anchor beings and that the universe is still gonna die. Deadpool then congratulates Wolverine for joining the MCU and says sadly he's coming in at a low point. At this point, the MCU's obviously had a lot of snags, with several of their movies not meeting expectations. Thor Love and Thunder had a lot of backlash, along with She-Hulk, Quantumania, which got mixed reviews. Secret Invasion was like, what the hell is this thing? And The Marvels is in the list for one of the biggest bombs of all time. We then had Echo, and yada yada yada, you get the point. So yeah, nice little self-referential joke, and I was a bit surprised they let it in, but hey, props for acknowledging it. A Deadpool then says he has a black belt in Karen, so he's gonna snitch on Paradox, which is when Paradox prunes him. As we discovered in Loki though, this just takes you to the Void, which is basically a dumping ground for erased timelines. Now Deadpool wakes up here, and along with the Secret Wars cover is the bottle of Pingo Doce from Incredible Hulk. This is what Stanley drank in his cameo, and it's not the only reference to him. Later on, we get an ad on a bus that says, "Your friendly neighborhood cleaners, Stanley Steamer." This comes with a picture of Stanley alongside it. It also has the phrase "Grime Fighters since 1922, which is the year that Stanley was born. Wolverine then picks him up, and we get our first fight between them. Now as we pull out, we can see the CN Tower there, which is another reference to Canada. Cutting to another shot, we can also catch the Hydra Captain America shield from the comics, as well as a winged helmet. This is a nod to the classic comic version of Thor, who donned one originally. Deadpool's then thrown into a gigantic 20th Century Fox logo. I love how it's basically saying Disney bought the company and then dumped them completely. The Fox from it was also changed to pictures to highlight the new direction it was going. That Fox of course ends with an X, with this often being emphasized in the X-Men openings. That X is prominently poking out here, with it of course letting us know that we're pretty much in an X-Men movie. Cutting back to Wolverine, we can then see a shield helicarrier, which is a little nod to the first Deadpool. There they wanted to fight on one, but couldn't get the rights from Marvel. So they made a nondescript generic one, but now they've got the ability to use it. Now it also may be a nod to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which I still say is canon, but no, pretty much pruned from the timeline. But I think Quake would have been great in this film, so get her in the future of the MCU somehow. Now there's also the Mary Celeste ship, which too made an appearance in Loki. This is probably the world's most famous ghost ship, with its crew mysteriously disappearing. On top of this, we have a dead Chitauri Leviathan, and when Nova's forces show up, we can spot the Golden Gate Bridge. This was of course a big set piece in X-Men The Last Stand, and it highlights how the timeline's getting pruned. They then break out in a fight to some AC/DCs, whose songs featured on the Iron Man soundtracks. During the battle, Deadpool swings around his sword, and I love how you can see his Avengers logo emblazoned on the handle. You might also notice these on the bottom of his magazines, which we see at the 37-minute mark. It's branding! In the past, we've seen the bottom of the swords have the name B and Arthur on, with this being a reference to the Golden Girls. For this movie's, the swords had the initials D, R, B, and S, which stands for Dorothy, Rose, Blanche, and Sophia. These are the Golden Girls, with Deadpool being a massive fan of them in the comics. Now we know from concept art by David Masson that originally we were going to have a Granny Pool at the end. This was going to be based on B. Arthur, but unfortunately it didn't make the cut. Now Wolverine then runs along the ground like a Wolverine, which is a move he does in the comics when fighting. He then does some swings and punches that, and I don't know who spotted this, but congratulations, that completely mirror the fight moves done by Flash Thompson at the start of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. Now we then get what's one of the funniest cameos in a Marvel movie ever. Hearing a voice, they then look up to see a hooded figure with this character dressed in red, white, and blue. I love all the misdirects here, with them even playing the Avengers theme, making you think it's Captain America. You can obviously see why Deadpool is as excited as we are, because again, he's a massive Cap fan. Having it all roused up to thinking we're getting the Avengers Assemble line, it's perfect when he shouts flame on. Now while this is going on, we see the caravan approaching, which has several notable Easter eggs. There's Toad from the X-Men, and he's riding on top of the Fantastic Car. This is the ride of the Fantastic Four, and I wonder if it's going to show up in the upcoming movie. It definitely has that retro feel. Along with this, there's also the Cupcake Truck from Moon Knight. There's a big sort of Mad Max vehicle as well, which we can see being pulled along by motorbikes. These are actually the Hydra ones, and you could see them chasing Cap in the first Avengers movie. We also have Red Skull's car from that film, but this time it's got some flames on it, flame-ons it. These are pulled from Tony Stark's Roadster, which we saw in the first Iron Man movie. A further nod to this is given to the little sign on the front, which is an Iron Man helmet instead of a Hydra one. Shoutouts to Canadian Life are also pointing out the large magnets attached to the Canadarm, which comes from a Canadian space shuttle. Now, they're very anti-Avengers, which we can also see by the flag. So stuff like that, it sets this up as being Captain America, and it all kind of plays into the joke. Now, a big returning character is Pyro, who's once more played by Aaron Stanford. Stanford confirmed recently that this is the same version of the character that we saw in The Last Stand. Now though, he's wearing a red and yellow costume, which is more akin to his one in the comics. Cap then drops and does a superhero landing, which Deadpool's made fun of in every single film. Busting out his flame on, we then see as Pyro quickly dispatches him. Originally the pair were going to have a much longer battle, but they thought it'd be funnier to just take him out in one go. This is then mirrored in the Sabretooth fight, which is over before it even gets going. This sees the return of Tyler Mane though, who originally played the character in the first film. He was recast down the line, but this has by far always been my favourite version of the character. In live action anyway. Beheading the character, Deadpool then holds it up and does a Furiosa Immortum Jojo, with this obviously playing off Mad Max. Earlier when talking about The Void, he said it was a bit Mad Maxy, but that would be IP infringement, so they don't want to go there. And this also kind of builds off of X-Men Origins, in which they wondered if beheading characters with healing factors would kill them. That movie ended with the severed head of Deadpool still alive, but alas, no more Sabretooth. Now they're then grabbed by the magnet and put in circular cages. You can spot a TVA agent in one of them, and I'm guessing that this was Rob McElhaney's character. We did see a shot in the trailer where one was begging before being snatched by Goliath, but this never made it to the final cut. So putting those two things together, and yeah, world's greatest detective, we've figured it out. Travelling out to Nova's base, we then get a couple more shots of the Void. This includes a landscape dotted with pyramids, which we saw during Loki. There we could also catch the Sphinx, which Kang used as a time-travelling ship. There's also some Navas, which appeared during Loki. Now during the scene, we get Johnny Storm telling us about the rest of the Fantastic Four. He talks about how Reed referred to the Void as a junkyard, and this means that he likely came here, or at the very least knew of its existence. Now in Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four run, Reed builds a device known as a bridge. This allows him to see into alternate universes, and it could have been here that he glanced at the landscape. Now this scene is what later gets expanded upon in the post-credit scene. There we see Chris Evans going off and finally getting to swear in the MCU. Cap was known for calling out bad language, so it's a nice little way to show how different they are.
Shit! Language.
Now, according to IMDb Trivia, this entire scene was the whole reason Evans came back. Well, that and the money truck, obviously, but apparently it was Ryan's idea, and Evans was over the moon as he never got to do this with Marvel. Reynolds even apparently offered him cue cards, but he was excited to memorize the dialogue. Alright, babe, I remember my first beer. You can tell he's loving the scene though, and this was shared with Jackman and Reynolds. They kept the camera on him, as the more the rant went on, the more they started laughing and ruining the take.
Well, gargling juggernauts, 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 juggernauts. Wow. And you can quote me. Okay.
Now from here we go across to the corpse of Giant Man. That's a nod to the Old Man Logan arc. There his skeleton was seen in the desert, but it was Hank Pym instead of Scott. Also, every time I say Giant Man, I have to do this big disclaimer because people keep saying it's just Ant-Man. It is, but in the comics they call him Giant-Man because the word giant has the word ant in it. Now, Deadpool says Paul Rudd's finally aged, and this is obviously a little joke about how the guy's nearly 60 and looks half your age. The Void also has a giant yellow jacket helmet in it too, so it is possible the pair both clash down here. Now amongst her forces, Nova's collected several other discarded and cast to the side characters. This includes the Juggernaut, bitch, with a guy wearing the Vinnie Jones costume. Jones was actually approached to play him, but he said it was too much drama putting on the suit. The new version's played by Aaron W. Reed, who was used as the body for Dude and Free Guy. On top of this, we also have the Blob who opens the gates. Azazel from First Class shows up, there's Psylocke, Callisto, Lady Deathstrike, Bullseye, and the Russian. The Russian's an even deeper cut to an often overlooked film, with that being Thomas Jane's Punisher. That makes me think the version of Punisher down here might have been him, though we don't get that clarified. And at this point, Cassandra makes her grand entrance with her coming in on a wheelchair. Obviously, this along with her baldness is meant to tease that this is Professor X. I also feel like Nova looks a lot more like McAvoy's version, and if you place the actors side by side, you can see the resemblance. Now this likeness is down to the fact she's actually Xavier's evil twin. First introduced during Grant Morrison's new X-Men run, she was born without a body. She then used Charles's DNA and acted like a parasite to make her own. Eventually she got to a point where she was powerful enough to attack Charles, but he blasted her psychically, which seemingly killed her. Their mother then ended up having a miscarriage, but Cassandra's consciousness remained. Disposed of, she lay low in the sewers and rebuilt herself from the things dumped down there. After decades, she became a fully formed human and sought out a path to get revenge on Charles. In the comics, she believed the world wasn't real and that it was actually a construct built by her and Charles. Here, she sort of resigned to the void as she views the landscape as being a paradise. Nova says she was pruned before she could even walk, highlighting how dangerous she is. And that takes us into theory time, if I could turn back theory time. So Nova's known in the comics as being the character that unleashed the Wild Sentinel and carried out a gigantic massacre. This is something we saw in X-Men 97, but there it was Bastion instead of her. However, I do wonder if she was originally from that timeline and her being pruned is what altered the events. It still played out as it was a canon event, but it meant that things were slightly different. I'll not do your head in with more theory time, but it's just something I thought that you've no doubt proven wrong already in the comments. Interestingly though, Mephisto was considered being the main villain of the film, but who knows what they're doing with him and Agatha. So I'm guessing that might have been why they changed it, but having Nova in this film makes more sense as it's an X-Men movie. Emma Corrin, who plays Nova, also says that Willy Wonka inspired the performance. This sort of gets a nod here as Deadpool calls it ableist. Wonka feigned walking with a limp in his introduction, so you can kind of see where they got the inspiration from. Happy they've brought Storm in, Deadpool then ends up snitching on what he said in the ride here. Nova then ends up killing him by ripping all his skin off his body. This leaves him as a bloody pulp on the floor, which somewhat foreshadows her own death at the end. There she's also completely ripped apart too when the Time Ripper detonates. Deadpool jokes that he wasn't his favourite Chris anyway, which is an ongoing debate at Marvel. You have Chris Evans, Chris Pratt, and also Chris Hemsworth, with fans going back and forth. Every time I talk about this debate though, I'm always reminded of the time the stars came forth and said, stop bullying Chris Pratt, because people were saying they didn't like him. Either way, Deadpool is kind of relieved because Evans was too expensive to keep around for the whole film. We also get a line about how Logan will be forced to sing the entire second act of Music Man. This is a show Jackman was playing the lead in right before the production on the movie began. Now, I personally love the line about how it may be hard to hear, but there's another British villain, and hey, we do get around. At this point, we also see how Nova's powers work, with her telepathic abilities being different to Charles. As she says, she has to get her hands dirty, and we get such a cool callback to the comics. Sticking her fingers through Deadpool's head, this is a move she did in the comics in order to invade people's minds. Throughout these scenes, you might also notice how long Nova's fingers are. This is something throughout the film, with them using prosthetics and VFX to create the look. Doing this then gives us a glimpse into Wade and Vanessa's relationship. We initially see her as being kind and comforting, but things are altered due to Nova's manipulation. Here she has Vanessa say Deadpool will never matter, which is further enforcing this idea in his mind. We see how powerful she is as Wolverine stabs her in the back, which is when we get a better look at the costume under her shirt. Nice bit of design here, and the bit underneath forms an X, but she survives all that, so she's very, very formidable, and she leaves them to be eaten by a Lithe. However, we we watch as they manage to escape on a rocket leg. It's a bit difficult to make out what this is, but I believe it's the Sentinel one from Days of Future Past. If you go back to when the magnet was set off to capture the gang, we could see this being pulled up out the dirt, and it's what knocked them out. Now they then go to a diner, which is Joe's diner from Spider-Man 2. It's pizza time. Here Deadpool talks about how his costume's red to hide the blood and that he understands how yellow could be useful too. Now that line about the costume being red is a nod to the line from the first film. He also asks if he wants to talk about what happened in his past or if they should just wait for a third act flashback. This ends up happening in the film as well, and it's basically how we learn the fate of the X-Men. Now outside we're introduced to Dogpool to Lady in Red. Played by Peggy the dog, Peggy is also nicknamed Mary Poppins and she won the award for Britain's ugliest dog. Should have been your mum though. Along with her is Nicepool, which is basically playing off handsome Deadpool from the comics. In the credits it says his name's Gordon Pool, which is a little meta joke about how Reynolds did a sketch with himself that featured the character Gordon Reynolds. People still tell me that it's his twin, but it's not his twin. You can't trick me into that. Now he also mentions how Lady Pool's gorgeous and that she's just had a baby, with Blake recently being pregnant in real life. That was the baby that they used as Baby Pool, so it is kind of setting up that. And not only has he not been scarred, but they've also added makeup and effects to make him appear younger. He's also got a bit more junk in the trunk. And we then get another banger line that made me burst out laughing in the film. Deadpool says how Wolverine's normally shirtless, but since the divorce he's let himself go. Which, don't tell TJ Miller that, mate. He was getting angry about being called a side character. This divorce was like literally happening while they were making this movie, and yeah, now on set they were actually worried about doing this bit, with writers Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick saying they didn't include it. Both said they didn't know Jackman well enough for that, and it was in fact Reynolds who was behind it. This joke, along with the Jennifer Garner divorce one later, was planned not to be used in case neither were cool with it. However, both said they found it hilarious, so it ended up staying in the movie. As we see later on though, Jackman's done the glow up divorced dad thing. That's the right way to handle it. Appearing shirtless at the end, we can see that he's absolutely abulous. Cutting to a wide shot, we can see the boat on the right is called the Conquistador. This is a nod to the one from the comics that was used by the Children of the Vault. They then end up borrowing Nicepool's Honda Odyssey and setting out on their own little odyssey. Coming across a crashed donut ship, this belonged to Thanos' Black Order in Infinity War. Deadpool brings up how Wolverine's suit looks like the Los Angeles Rams, with their colours being blue and yellow. I bring this up clearly doesn't sit well with Logan, because Deadpool says he's surprised the X-Men let him leave the house in it. But Guy's wearing it as a sentimental reminder. Deadpool then starts doing the Spider-Man web shooter fingers thing and explains the whole saving the universe thing was just an educated wish. This sends Logan off the handle, and Jackman gets to deliver one of his best performances. Guy completely knocks it out the park and goes from angrily laughing to torn up in a second. He also talks about how the Avengers will accept anyone, so clearly knows about them. Now I do wonder if they exist in his world, akin to the Illuminati, and it could lay the groundwork for Avengers vs X-Men, especially as he said fuck the Avengers at the diner. Now this then leads into a big fight in which we get that moment where Deadpool's head slammed into the radio. This is something that's a call back to the first Deadpool film, as it's something that happened when he had that fight in the car. Along with the Greatest Showman soundtrack, we also hear a song from Grease on the radio. That is, You're the One That I Want, with it possibly being a nod to John Travolta. He starred alongside Jackman in the movie Swordfish, alongside Halle Berry and Vinnie Jones. With them being planned to star in this film, I wonder if that was a leftover joke from that. Also, I love how we now get focus on the coexist sign, which is where we start to see it get covered in blood. The pair then both end up exhausted, and that night they're taken to the base of the Resistance. In here, we get several more Easter eggs along with some big returning characters. Now Deadpool wakes up in a bed that looks like the jaws of a gigantic beast. This in itself comes from Thor Ragnarok, where it was used as the bed for the Hulk. We also have the Scarlet Witch statue that we saw at Mount Wundagore in Multiverse of Madness. There's also a make-do chess set, which could be another the game of chess that Charles and Eric's played throughout the X-Men franchise. And at this point, Electra enters, with this being the third time Garner's played the character. Along with Daredevil, she starred in her own solo movie way before Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel graced the big screen. Now Deadpool kinda makes fun of how Electra's overlooked though, as he says he thought she was Wonder Woman. She's once more got her costume from the movie though, along with her classic sides. Now Garner has worked with Reynolds and Levy before, with the trio collaborating on the Adam Project. Entering next is Blade, who's once more played by Wesley Snipes. Guy never takes his sunglasses off, and I wondered if this was to save on the VFX. In case you don't know, right, Snipes refused to open his eyes during one of the films, so they had to CGI them on. Either way, he just oozes coolness throughout every scene. There's only one Blade, and there's only ever gonna be one Blade, which yeah, it might be true due to how the MCU Blade keeps getting moved back. Now getting him back is something I never thought we'd see happen. In case you don't know, the pair had a lot of off-screen tension, which is why Blade says he never liked Deadpool. This is a nod to Blade Trinity, which apparently had a lot of difficulties on set. Snipes and Reynolds were said to get into it a lot, with Snipes remaining in character between takes. So a 20-year long rumour came out of the film that said the pair never really liked each other. They've since clarified it was a big hoax, which mightn't be true, but yeah, you can see why people thought he'd never return. However, everyone has to pay respect, because the first Blade movie basically saved Marvel. It was a key cog in getting the company out of bankruptcy and basically helped pave the way for what we have today. Also, it's important to bear in mind that Blade Trinity is kind of the reason that Deadpool got made. There, Reynolds plays a sort of prototype Deadpool with the character Hannibal King. On set, someone actually showed him the Deadpool comic, which said he looked like Ryan Reynolds crossed with a Sharpay. This is when Reynolds started thinking about taking on the character, and it was basically what started off his fascination with the role. A playing card then comes in with Channing Tatum finally getting to play Gambit. I love how he says, "They call me Gambit," and Deadpool says, "Are you sure, or do you just really want them to?" This caps off a long-running joke in which his Gambit film was stuck in development hell. Guy was going to play him all the way back in X-Men Origins, but scheduling conflicts meant he had to drop out. However, he still persisted with making the movie for the character, and even had several writers and directors attached to it. Even in the Fox-Disney merger, they talked about getting it off the ground, but since then, the project's basically been mothballed. In 2019, it was eventually announced as being cancelled, and we thought that it was just going to be one of those things we never got to see. At one point, the group even talked about returning to their universes, with Gambit saying he doesn't even know if he has one. This is because his movie never got off the ground, and thus there's nowhere to return to. However, it is possible that we could see him back soon. They actually dropped a full screen version of the scene that we get at the end, which shows Gambit turning around. He looks up, and in his eyes appears to be a reflection of a portal, so he could have been pulled into Deadpool or an X-Men adjacent Earth. The accent is spot on though, and I love how you can't even understand what he's saying at some points. Deadpool also comments on his costume and says he looks like a superhero version of Hawkeye. Now lastly, we get Daphne Keene's X-23. Keene has confirmed this is also the same version of Laura that we met in Logan. Now originally, Keene denied being in the movie when promoting The Acolyte, but she was finally unveiled in trailer 2. This was because she wanted to go to the premiere and knew they had other surprises in the film. Deadpool in this conversation also talks about how Disney lied when they bring up how Magneto's dead. You might remember, right, that we discussed a while back that there were rumors Magneto was going to be in the film. However, we recently learned that Marvel actually put out fake leaks in order to muddy the waters around the movie. So Deadpool saying Disney lied after bringing up Magneto kind of plays on those fake leaks that only idiots reported on. And these characters are all people who were taken and sent here by the TVA, so it's likely they're akin to Deadpool. Hopefully, we see them back in Secret Wars, and that would explain why they were pruned while their timelines were destroyed. Now, along with these dead characters, we learn of others that were down in the void. This includes the Punisher, Quicksilver, and Daredevil, the latter of which was played by Ben Affleck, who was of course married to Jennifer Garner. This is where we get the divorce joke, but Electra says it's fine and bit close to home. Now they realise that because they survived Nova, the Resistance might stand a chance. Thus they come up with the idea of using Juggernaut's helmet, which will block her psychic blasts. This is something that pulls from the comics, with Juggernaut being Charles' stepbrother. Like Magneto, he used his helmet to block his telepathy, and this will have the same effect on Nova. Travelling back to the base, we can then spot the Asgardian palace in the void. There's also the Milano from Guardians, and Blade uses one of the Punisher's rocket launchers to blow up in the entrance. Inside, Laura puts on the sunglasses that we saw the character getting in Logan. It then leads into a big battle in which every hero gets to show off their powers. What I love is that this really gives each of them their own moment in the spotlight, and it's a celebration of their characters. Also, I think Electra might be fighting a version of Spike at one point, with this character appearing during The Last Stand. Blade also says some motherfuckers are still trying to ice skate uphill, which calls back to his line from the first film. Snipes was the one who came up with that, and it's one of my favourite parts of that movie. He also gets to use his deadly boomerang, which is a weapon that he used in the first film. Now while this is going on, Wolverine's held at mercy by Nova. Though the powers are different, this is a lot like the train scene in the first X-Men movie. Laura then manages to get Juggernaut's helmet up there while Logan's taken into his mind. We see several tombs for the X-Men, with these riffing off the ones in the Days of Future Past comic. We also know from behind the scenes shots of this sling ring that it also has 2 Infinity Stones. These are the Time Stone and Reality one, which likely allowed the user to traverse the multiverse and arrive at any point. right. However, having it here is also what allows Nova to send Deadpool back to his universe, as these stones grant that ability. I know that Infinity Stones only work in their respective universes in the comics, but we'll just ignore that and carry on. I also think it's in the show too, because it didn't work at the TVA. Now the pair then crash land at the car dealership, and we see the family from the start. Peter says that he and Wade are a team, so he'll make sure he still gets half the commission. Now one of the kids getting shown about says it's Wolverine. Deadpool then explains that Disney brought him back and they're gonna make him do it until he's 90. Probably after he's dead, judging by how much they love bringing back dead actors. Now I did wonder if this was a little nod to Professor X and Logan, who mentions still having to do it at 90. With Nova, we then discover as she learns about Pyro's deal with Paradox. He gives it up without getting the fingers in the face though, and cracks under interrogation. This might be a nod to Weasel in Deadpool 2, who gives up everything to Cable straight away due to being scared of torture. He does still get infiltrated before his neck snaps psychically though, which is similar to how Wanda killed Professor X. He then infiltrates Paradox's mind. This allows her to learn of the Time Ripper, which will give her the ability to take every universe to the void. This will mean that she rules over everything, and it'll be something that makes her a god. Deadpool and Wolverine then arrive before they're flung into a window. Looking at the sign outside of this, we can see this is Liefeld's just feet. This is a little jab to creator Rob Liefeld, who people often say can't draw feet.
Look at this dude. Wait till you see the. No.
Now, in order to try and stop them, Nova ends up opening up a portal. Dogpool and Nicepool come through first, with Deadpool calling the latter Van Wilder. This is a reference to his movie Van Wilder, and then Nicepool says he can break the fourth wall too. He turns and says The Proposal, which was a movie in which Reynolds starred alongside Sandra Bullock. Which, that's not how fourth wall breaks work, mate. Now, along with him comes the Deadpool Corps, which includes the ones already mentioned in the video. However, along with them is Headpool, who's voiced by Nathan Fillion. Fillion originally cameoed in the first film, but they ended up cutting out the scene. So this is a little make right on that, with a pair also working together on Two Guys, a Girl in a Pizza Place. There's also a Western cowboy Deadpool, who's voiced by Matthew McConaughey. Tom Holland's brother also got to play one as well, with him playing Harry Poole. He was in No Way Home in a deleted scene, and Tom ended up catching his brother. There's also a 2099 version called Warder Wilson and Zenpool in the grey costume. There's also a Scottish one wearing a kilt, a retro one with a gas mask, and a Japanese samurai one. Deadpool then vents his frustration, saying he wishes they could just be done with the multiverse, which it has gotten a bit out of control recently. Like, absolutely everything is multiverses at this point. He then uses Nicepool as a human shield, which leads to the character's death. He and Headpool are the only ones who don't have healing powers, as the latter comes from the Marvel zombie universe. Nicepool loses his head, he loses his body, and I was thinking that they could combine the characters. Now I'm guessing that he doesn't have that healing factor because it was never triggered, which explains why he still looks good. Wolverine also calls Deadpool God's perfect idiot, which is what the credits listed Reynolds at in the opening of Deadpool 1. Grabbing Nicepool's gold-plated gun, we see as Deadpool and Wolverine head out to face the call. Wolverine then gives us the money shot by finally putting on his mask. Weather Effects were the ones who worked on this, with them saying there were other challenges than what they normally had with the Deadpool one. Though it initially started off as a stiff, rigid helmet, there were some expressions they wanted to convey. So they allowed for certain movement and also put a scrunch around the bridge of his nose so you could get some emotion. There was also a practical version of the helmet, which you can see in the behind the scenes stuff. Also, I love how you can catch 3 claw marks around Deadpool's mask due to all the fights they've had. Now, while all this is going on, we can hear Madonna's Like a Prayer. Apparently, this is an idea Reynolds has had on his mind for decades. Even before Wolverine became part of the story, they originally had Colossus dying to it while Deadpool fought zombies. This would be in Hell, which was in the treatment in which Mephisto was the villain. Now, though those ideas were scrapped, Like a Prayer lived on. It now takes on a bigger meaning, as Wolverine showing up like this felt like all our prayers had been answered. Now, typically Madonna doesn't license her songs for films easily. However, Reynolds and Levy visited her home to show her the scene and explain why it was needed. Her son was a big fan of the character, so in the end she said that they could use it. However, she had some notes on how to improve the scene, and thus they reshot it within 72 hours with her notes. Now, this scene takes the action from left to right, with Levy stating he was inspired by Lawrence of Arabia. There, all the heroes fight from the left, which is something they adopted here. It's also, of course, similar to scenes like Old Boy, and there's lots of one-take action scenes that were inspired by that film. Such a good moment though, and every time I've watched it I've got goosebumps. Now, though they come out on top, the Deadpools all regenerate, which could be building off that zombie idea. That healing factor also made me realise that this is the reason why Nicepool's the only one that wears armour. And throughout this we can see things like the samurai's arms have started to regenerate with them being baby-like. This is something we've seen in the franchise before, with Wade's legs growing back like this in Deadpool 2. Peter Pool then arrives and gets them to stand down by saying that these guys are with him. Originally, they had also planned an appearance of him in the Void where we'd watch him casually lift Mjolnir. You can see the guys chunk through the costume as well, and it reminded me a lot of Love Sausage in the Boys comics. If my guy wanted some clothes to fit though, he should have checked out our merch store right below the video. There we've got a ton of t-shirts and hoodies that are designed to accentuate the best parts of your body. We've got our It's All Connected ones, Loki, and a lot more, so if you're a Marvel maniac then check it out below. Now this gives the pair the chance to go and stop the Time Ripper, which we see is being used by Cassandra. This is spaghettifying the universe, which is also something we witnessed in Loki. If you look closely at the machine, you might also notice there's lots of golden vials within it. These all look like the pruning charges the TVA use, which allow them to wipe out a branch timeline. Down in there, Deadpool also says to Paradox that Wolverine's mask is like Batman, except he can move his neck. This again is a little jab at DC, with most of the Batman suits not allowing for this function. Now they rush down into the tunnel, which is where they shot the turn off your phones bit that played in certain cinemas. Initially, Wolverine goes to take Deadpool's place, but Deadpool rushes inside. He does the Vulcan hand gesture, which is also something Spock did before dying in the Wrath of Khan. Building off what Happy said at the start, he says he's doing it because they need him to. We also get shots of the TVA screens during this and can see their motto for all time always in the top right. Now after realizing he can't reach the other side, Wolverine ends up coming in and giving a helping hand. Together, they then destroy Cassandra while they do those head ticks. This was first shown in Jacob's Ladder, with it now being something that's used in a lot of films. These moments are also similar to the ending of Guardians of the Galaxy, in which the energy being shared stops everyone from dying. Wolverine says he is the X-Man, and I love how we get a bird's eye view shot of the bridge that forms into an X. They then manage to destroy Cassandra, but unfortunately it seems they died during it. Thus Paradox can spin any story he wants and he lies to B-15. However, the pair come back to Iris and reveal that because both worked together it didn't kill them. We also get some sexual tension between B-15 and Peter. B-15 says she's going to show them something huge, and Deadpool replies by saying that's what Scoutmaster Kevin used to say. This is someone who's been mentioned in the franchise before, and he was brought up in the bathhouse scene during Deadpool 2.
Scoutmaster Kevin?
B-15 then says they've saved the timeline, and she ends up saving the Resistance in the Void. Laura ends up showing in this timeline later on, so it seems like she indeed gave them all a home. Outside we also see as Deadpool and Logan get shawarma, which is a nod to the post-credit scene from the Avengers. Deadpool says, right, that the Avengers discovered it, and I'm gonna be honest mate, I didn't know shawarma existed until watching that movie. I'm a basic. At the party though, we see everyone's found a home, and there's a little spark between Wade and Vanessa. We close out with a shot of the two masks, and you can also catch a pizza box behind them. This is actually Feige's famous pizza, which is what the delivery guy was dropping off in the first Deadpool movie. This of course was a nod to Kevin Feige, but at the time they were still owned by Fox. Still, these two helmets next to that, it shows how these three collaborators have managed to finally come together. It's the perfect way to close out the movie, and that then takes us to the credits. To Green Day Good Riddance, we see a montage of a lot of behind the scenes moments in the making of the Fox movies. It's such a nice trip down memory lane, and it reminds us of everything from the past 24 years. It's been an incredible journey, and we close out with the 20th Century Fox logo. This sunsets things for the studio, but what a way to close out its legacy. We also get a touching line that says for Henry Delaney, who's Rob's son who sadly passed away. Always gets me hearing about that, but I hope you've enjoyed us going back through the film, as I've had a blast breaking this down. It's one of my favorite comic book movie trilogies ever. I realized when I was doing this edit, yeah, you can't really see these, but yeah, these box sets, yeah, they're classic, and I can't wait to pick up number 3 and just complete that trilogy, because it's a banger trilogy. Either way, if you want to support the channel as a member of the Spoiler Society, then please click the join button. You know what, I'll give you early access every week to videos, as it goes such a long way to helping us out. No, but it really means a lot. I'm so blessed to have you guys supporting the channel like this, and it means we can just do these really long in-depth videos and not worry about having to just shove stuff out the door every single day. So we really appreciate it. It means a lot to me and the team, and thank you everyone who signed up so far. Now Deadpool and Wolverine is currently the highest grossing R-rated film of all time, but if you want to see our breakdown of the first comic book movie to do that, then that's on screen right now. Our full video on Joker should get you fully caught up before we dive into Folie à Deux. So definitely go check it out, and with that out of the way, huge thank you for sticking through the breakdown. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.